Welcome to the board's July 24th, 25th, 2019 board meeting. My name is Greg Lippy, Vice President of the board. I would like to advise all individuals present and watching via webcasting that former President Victor Law tendered his resignation from the board effective July 15th. With his resignation as the board's Vice President, I am now the acting president until such time as the board conducts new elections. The board's next scheduled meeting is September 13th, 2019. With the board's approval, we will add elections to the agenda of that meeting. As included elsewhere in the meeting materials, the September meeting is scheduled for Sacramento. And what we will be adding is the election of president and vice president. Do I hear a motion to add this to the agenda?
I'll move to add it to the agenda on September 13th.
Thank you.
And I second.
Thank you. Are there any comments on the part of the members? Any comments on the part of the public? Okay, moving on. Yeah, we're moving on to the vote.
Very smooth. Nice segue.
Good catch, wasn't it? Okay. All right, so all those in favor, raise your hands. Looks unanimous to me. Okay, thank you. One other thing I wanted to mention, we've been receiving questions as to when we will have a permanent executive officer. We made a request, which is currently under review by the DCA. As soon as we know more, we will be making an announcement. As I call the meeting to order, I would like to advise all members of the public, both present or watching the meeting's webcast, that the board is a consumer protection agency and it is subject to the Open Meetings Act. The board's strategic plan establishes standing committees through which the board establishes its goals and organizes its activities. Each of these committees is comprised of public and licensee members. The committee structure provides an important venue for ensuring that staff and members share information in crafting and implementing objectives. These meetings also provide an opportunity for stakeholder involvement, and public comment is encouraged. Following committee meetings, the chairs from each of the respective committees provide reports to the full board as part of board meetings. Committee recommendations on policy decisions are referred to the full board as the final decision maker. As included on the agenda during this meeting, the board will receive reports from the chairpersons of several of the board's committees. As indicated on the agenda, the board has a significant number of items for consideration. Items may be taken out of order, although I don't intend to do that. If necessary, public comment on the various agenda items may be limited to 3 minutes per individual. We respectfully request that individuals providing public comment be respectful of board member time and refrain from restating comments previously considered by members of the board, whether those comments occurred during the committee meeting or during this meeting. Thank you in advance for your consideration and cooperation. And I want to say that we really appreciate everybody being here, and we really want to hear from everybody that wants to speak. So it is important to follow, if necessary, the 3-minute rule. Please note that members of the board may be using an electronic device with an electronic copy of the meeting materials. Please be advised that such members are using their devices for this purpose and are not communicating with each other via email or other electronic means. If you're interested in receiving continuing education credit for your attendance at the meeting, please remember to sign in and out on the designated sheet at the back of the room. This meeting is being webcast. If you wish to speak, please come to the speaker's table. When acknowledged to speak, speak directly into the microphone. This will ensure that those individuals watching the webcast are aware of all discussion and action. The board will convene in closed session during this meeting. Upon conclusion of closed session, the board will reconvene in open session and will adjourn the meeting in open session. The board does not intend to webcast that portion of the meeting. I thank you all for attending. I look forward to a productive meeting, and I will now take roll call to establish a quorum. Roll call will begin on my right.
Shirley Kim, public member.
Ricardo Sanchez, public member.
Albert Wong, professional member.
Lavonza Butler, professional member.
Greg Lippy, public member.
Maria Serpa, licensee member.
Debbie Gill, professional licensee member.
Very nice, Debbie. Alan Chad, professional member.
Thank you. We have now established a quorum. The board will now entertain any public comments for items not on the agenda. I'd like to remind anybody coming forward at this time that the board may not discuss or take action on any matter that's being raised during this public comment section that's not included on the agenda, except to decide whether to place it on the matter on agenda of the future. So please identify yourself.
Good afternoon. I'm just turning on my timer to make sure that I'm on 3 minutes.
Okay. I haven't said you have to have 3 minutes yet,
Oh,
so
okay. Then I won't.
you're okay. You're okay right now.
Then I won't. My name is Subhash, and I'm the managing member of Pantheon Labs LLC, a 503B outsourcing facility based in California.
Could you speak right into the microphone? Because, yeah, thank you.
I'll start again.
Very good.
My name is Subhash, and I'm the managing member of Pantheon Labs LLC, a 503B outsourcing facility based in California. We're still awaiting a California license, even after 12 weeks, or you can say 90 days of application submission. I'm also the chairperson of the newly formed 503B Americas Association. Membership is free. The objective of the association is to promote good being a very subjective word, 503B CGMP practices, educate members and all alike on CGMP, and provide inputs and concerns raised by members on small batch, large batch production to the FDA, and also provide feedback for 503B CGMP compliances and concerns raised by members and clinicians for drugs in short supply, as well as interface with various medical associations for availability of small batch orphan drugs from 503Bs by assisting in somehow eliminating interstate commerce barriers imposed by various agencies. But today I'm here representing Pantheon Labs LLC, a 503B facility. I would like the board to address two concerns today and assist us, or in future meetings related to registration and licensing of 503B startups in California. The first concern that we have is the time span it is taking for registration or obtaining license for a startup 503B facility from California Board of Pharmacy. It is taking longer than specified, and there seems to be no transparency, and upon inquiry of license status, the response from the board is an auto-response, unsigned and generic. We are seeking assistance, and my suggestion is for the board to have a board member or members or a committee allocated for this purpose, so that a business can get information and status and some time frame on submission of their application. All that we receive are auto responses and no resolution, whether it be a telephone call or an email. For us, 12 weeks as specified by the board have come and gone, and still no resolution or answer. Second concern.
We may wind up going to that 3 minutes, so.
Even though temporary license fees are paid, there is no mechanism for applicant to obtain the license until inspection is completed, or to obtain any notification as to when an inspection will be conducted or when a temporary license will be issued. Once again, all they will receive are auto replies. In conclusion, I would like to add, for a business such as ours, it is extremely important to obtain licenses in a timely manner, to be able to produce and supply drugs in short supply locally and interstate. Otherwise, patient care is jeopardized, as every 503B has its own specialty. Furthermore, one has to rescind employment offers. I would like the board to consider, or maybe discuss, to have a transparent mechanism for startup 503Bs to obtain information on their license application and status. Thank you.
Thank you.
The key is we need somewhere to go. Like, we can't go running to
Finish your thought.
We,
Go
we
ahead.
can't go running to, I'm quite sure, to Ann Sodergren and say, hey, what's happening? Because she's got better things to do, so we need a person to go to.
Got it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Here's somebody I recognize.
Oh, you recognize me?
Yeah. Former
Former,
president of the State Board of Pharmacy, Amy Gutierrez.
thanks, Greg. Well, I just wanted to come up, I'll be much less than 3 minutes, but I just wanted to thank all the board members for your active service on protection of the California public, and also to congratulate Greg Lippy on his new role as acting president. Wish you the best.
Thank you.
So, congratulations. Thanks.
Thank you, Amy.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
My name is Jasbal Kumar. I'm a registered pharmacist in the state of California, and currently I serve as the Associate Director of Pharmacy Operations, representing today Proteus Digital Health Incorporated. We are a healthcare technology company with operations both in Redwood City, California, and Hayward, California. Proteus Digital Health is one of the leaders in the relatively new space or therapeutic category known as digital medicines. We have developed and are commercializing an FDA-approved ingestible sensor, wearable devices, and software that enable patients and care teams to improve the efficacy of a wide range of pharmacotherapies. Our technology provides pill-level ingestion validation and enables the monitoring of a wide range of physiological metrics, such as activity and rest by patients and their care teams. The ingestible sensor is the size of a grain of sand, and it can be built into any oral medication, turning it into what we know as digital medicine. Many digital medicines are in commercial use today, including an NDA-approved product indicated for the treatment of serious mental illness. As Proteus expands its clinical evidence activities, more pharmacies will be dispensing digital medicines in California. Since this technology is new to them, Proteus Digital Health wanted to offer a deeper dive into our technology and how we've helped patients better their health care. We would like the chance to share our knowledge around the role of digital medicines and how they can play a role in elevating the clinical outcomes for all patients with chronic and infectious disease, as well as serious mental illness. My request today on behalf of Proteus Digital Health is to be considered as an agenda item for a future full committee board meeting. And I appreciate your time today, and thank you for this consideration.
Thank you. Joe?
Hello, my name is Joe Grasella, University Compounding Pharmacy. And just for a topic of discussion for the Enforcement Committee, I'd like to take a look at the disciplinary guidelines. There's 4 different categories, and all 4 of them, the minimum is revocation of license. Seems like it's pretty harsh, and there are other alternatives. And considering the fact that now, if you get revoked and placed on probation, the collateral damage is done by Medi-Cal dropping you, all these different insurance companies dropping you, institutions. So anyways, I'd like to just bring it up because it seems like it's very harsh to revoke somebody's license for some of these that are kind of minor corrections.
Thank you, Joe. Anybody else? No? Okay. One more? I know it's a long way.
I wasn't fully prepared, so I was hesitating a bit. So, but then I'll just plant the seed of what I've observed. I was wondering what the Board of Pharmacy thinks about implementing a regulation or something that requires ambulatory care surgery centers to have pharmacists visit and do pharmaceutical services for them once a month versus the once a quarter that's happening now. I went to some surgery centers with someone else, and there's just so many things that are falling through the cracks as far as in regards to patient safety. We would walk into the operating room and see like propofol filled, pre-filled syringes, unattended, unlabeled, sitting there as a time saver that the nurses were doing and aren't, there's just so many things that we saw, like expired meds. And even though this once a quarter is just not that much, it's not really monitoring, and things are slipping through the cracks, and nurses have a lot of questions that are pharmacy related. And if we can go and have it, like go and tell them what's the latest happening in the meetings, and go through the charts, looking through those doctors, what they pull, what they use, and what's wasted is not always, even though they all know it, it's still, there's like lots of mistakes, what happened, and to go back if it's once a quarter to figure out where the mishap was with the controlled substance. It's just not, it seems like a lot is being overlooked and not safe for patients. And
So you'd like us to agendize that for discussion at a later meeting?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
That would be great. And then I have some people that are actually calling on the surgery centers that weren't able to come, and we can like write things up, or to demonstrate. Is that good?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. In that case, next item is approval of the May 7th to 8th, 2019 board meeting minutes. Do I have a motion to approve, or are there comments that need to be made? Okay, do we have a second? Okay. Motion by Ricardo, second by Albert.
Is there board comment first?
Board comment?
I have one area of correction under the compounding committee, which is on page 28
Okay.
of the minutes.
Compounding, page 20.
One item for correction on the compounding committee report on page 28.
Okay.
I believe it's just a typographical second paragraph. Chairperson Shad. I tried to get in there. And so just a correction to Chairperson Serpa.
Oh, okay, great. Okay, that's it? Okay, any public comment? All right, all those in favor of approving the minutes, raise your hand. Approving them as corrected. Thank you, unanimous. Oh no, Shirley, you're an abstention? You weren't here. Thank you. Okay. Next item is approval of the June 21st, 2019 board meeting minutes. Do I hear a motion to approve, or do we have some changes to make to these?
I make a motion to approve.
Okay. Do we have a second? Thank you. Are there any board comments? No. Public comments? Okay, all those in favor, raise your hand. Okay, all those opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Yeah. Okay, now, recognition and celebration of pharmacists licensed in California for 40 years and other recognition. This will be the first meeting where the board recognizes and celebrates pharmacists that have been licensed in California for 40 years. In the past, it was 50 years. About 2,800 pharmacists in California have reached this level, and they're all here today. Just kidding. So, as I see it, we have, I believe, 3 here today. And, okay, I think there's more. Okay, 4. So, will Frederick Meister come up? Oh, okay. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Now you have to say something.
Okay.
Okay. So tell us where you went to school.
I went to University of Southern California.
Okay. And tell us where you first worked.
Well, I first worked at the corner drugstore when I was 16 years old.
Okay.
And then I worked, after I graduated, I taught at USC for 3 or 4 years. And then I taught at University of Iowa for 2 winters.
Mm-hmm.
And then I came back to where I belong and worked at Hoag Memorial Hospital for 24 years. I worked for the medical staff. And then I went through midlife crisis and accepted a position with industry where I was a medical director in medical affairs and retired a couple of years ago from Merck after 10 years with that company.
Great, great. So what would you say to any new pharmacist about to step into the field today?
The opportunities are just incredible. You don't have to stick to the traditional old-fashioned design of a pharmacist. You can do pretty much anything you want because of the education you have and hopefully the maturity that went along with it.
Great. Well, congratulations. Oh, we're going to take a picture. Okay. Okay. You want to see me? Okay. Okay. Philip Zia. So we're all supposed to be back here? Philip, congratulations.
Thank you.
So, tell us where you started and bring us up to date.
I graduated from USC in 1974, and then I worked at a retail pharmacy for FECO. I don't know if anybody remember FECO.
I remember that.
Yeah, and then I only stayed there for a few months, and then I went into hospital pharmacy. Excuse me. So I started working at City of Hope 2nd of 1975, and then I retired in 2014. So I've been there for like 40 years.
Very good. What would you tell a new pharmacist starting out today?
Well, obviously the opportunity is tremendous. You just have to work hard, and you can be, what you want to be. As a matter of fact, one of my daughters is a pharmacist as well.
Oh, great. Well, that's very good. And let me give you a pen.
Thank you.
And like I said, I'm not good at putting these on, so I don't want to stick you. Go ahead and put it on yourself. And let's take a photo.
Okay.
Here, congratulations.
Thank you.
That's good.
Well, actually,
Thank you.
my elder brother served on the board for 8 years.
Oh, really?
Caleb Zia. Anybody remember Caleb Zia?
There you go. Former president. Okay. Stephen Thompson. Congratulations, Stephen. think I just turned this on. Okay. So tell us how you started and bring us up to date.
Okay, great. I'm a graduate from the University of Pacific, and after graduation, I went to work for Torrance Memorial Medical Center, and I have been there for 42 years. And I am currently the director of pharmacy, which I've been for 23 and a half years of that. Thank you. And then I'm currently the president of California Society of Health System Pharmacists, and was a previous board member for CSHP also.
Great. Boy, you're real loyal to your.
Yeah, they're a good employer. So
Great. Glad to hear that. So here's your pen. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Let's take a photo. Okay, Joe. You know, I can't read your writing, but I know who you are.
That's okay.
Okay, so.
All right, I started off at Wayne State University in Detroit 40 years ago. And we came to California and opened up Park Medical Pharmacy in Chula Vista. And that grew to Medical Center Pharmacies, which is 20 pharmacies in the San Diego area, employing over 400 people and 70 pharmacists. But I had my personal interest in compounding. I have now 26 years as the pharmacist in charge of University Compounding Pharmacy, and I think that is an excellent direction to go for any pharmacist. And I think with the new 503B, the 503As, it is a very prominent direction in pharmacy where you could apply all of your knowledge, from professional to chemistry to math. It really has been the best. And thank you.
Congratulations. Here's your pen.
Definitely need to.
Okay, now it's time to turn the meeting over to Alan Shadd to provide a report on the Enforcement Committee activities. Alan?
Thank you, Mr. President. All right, on behalf of the Enforcement Committee, I'm going to report on the activities from our July 10, 2019 meeting. First item was presentation and discussion of the board's citation and fine program. The committee has dedicated time at several meetings to discuss several aspects of the board's citation and fine program. The chair report details several provisions of pharmacy law that govern the board's citation and fine program, including the board's authority to issue citations, as well as the factors to be considered in assessing an administrative fine. As part of our most recent review of the citation and fine program, we've received an update on implementation of the board's 2018 guidance to staff, wherein we suggested that staff consider using the abatement provisions, especially in cases where violations involve medication errors. The presentation, including statistics, are detailed in the presentation in attachment 1 of the meeting materials. During our meeting, the committee was advised that based on the review of citations issued and order of abatement, about 75% of the licensees choose to follow the order and complete additional education, whereas 25% of the licensees elect to merely pay the fine. Also, the top violations for the past quarter have resulted in issuance of citations that are medication errors, followed by drug losses and then by record-keeping violations. The presentation also included summaries of some of the medication error violations. This information from this presentation will be included in the next issue of the script. Staff also advised us, while there appears to be a significant drop in citations, this reduction in large part is because of vacancies and resulting backlog. Any board members wish to have comment?
I just had one question. So, can you repeat that statistic 75% of licensees chose to follow the order and complete additional education versus 25% elected to just pay the fine.
Ann, you want to comment on that?
And I guess my question is, are we better off if they follow the order? Because then maybe they learn stuff versus just paying a fine.
So how we implemented a lot of this is we are making it an option, so they can either seek the additional education, in which case then we either reduce or eliminate the fine, or they can just pay it. So what we've noticed is that about 75% of people are choosing to get more education, which I think was consistent with what the board's approach was. It's like, let's really focus on educating, making people perhaps better pharmacists, that kind of thing. So that's how we implemented it.
And I guess my question is, maybe for, the public or whatever, should they maybe be just required to do the training? Because I'm thinking if we're just allowing them to pay the fine, are we fixing the problem or just kind of putting a Band-Aid over it?
I think, we're always welcome to policy direction from the board if you would like us to reassess how we're currently implementing the order of abatements and make them mandatory as opposed to incentivizing. Happy to hear the comments.
Yeah, do you want to move in that, have
maybe
discussion on that?
Yeah, I was thinking maybe at your committee, I'd be very trusting of your committee to kind of review it and come back and say, no, we think this is right and we're getting what we need.
I think articulation of what we're doing is always a good idea. So a little clarity on that, and I think we should have discussion on that. We'll do that.
At the committee, and then
yeah.
you bring it back to us?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any public comment?
Sorry.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Public comment? I couldn't hear it.
Yes. Yes, my name is Daryl Moore. I'm the Chief Pharmacy Services Manager for California Department of Veteran Affairs. And I just was wondering that 25% that pay the fine, how many repeat incidents have occurred since you're going to consider maybe taking the fine away and requiring the training?
Okay, so, as far, that's kind of a staff question. Can you address that? But as part of the disciplinary guidelines, past citations, past infractions are taken into consideration, and so it's a progressive discipline on that. If that's part of your question.
Yeah, that's my question.
Okay. So it's taken into consideration. What's happened here with the board? There was a lot of push that we weren't really being successful in offering the offenders a way to mitigate the fine, or make sure that they're educated, and so this was an option that we hoped that those that were that had received fines would take, and so it's something that we just started in the last 2 years, probably.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we'll move on. Post-implementation review of inventory reconciliation requirements. The inventory reconciliation requirements took effect in April 2018. Since that time, the board has provided guidance documents including FAQs that are published on the board's website. During our meeting, the committee reviewed a sample of the types of questions that are received by board staff, as well as the board-approved FAQs on the implementation. The committee noted that it seemed appropriate to complete post-implementation review of the regulation to determine if additional guidance or changes may be necessary to meet the policy goal of the regulation. After public comment, the committee suggested that clarification may be needed regarding ADDS provisions in the regulation as used in hospitals, as well as the need for a possible definition of satellite. Further, it was suggested that the board should consider if signatures be needed to required of all pharmacists involved in inventory activities, or if electronic records would suffice. As the committee chair, I'll be working with staff to make recommendations on additional FAQs and possible changes to the regulation language to clarify the board's expectation for reconciliation activities. I believe the focus will primarily be on satellite locations within the hospitals, the physical counts of drugs in the devices, as well as the signature requirements for the pharmacies. Further, the committee also received public comment on previously approved FAQs. Members of the public were willing to discuss these, but agreed to submit their comments in writing to allow for research in advance of our next committee meeting. Any comments from the board members?
I'd like to just make a comment, and I'll speak into the mic this time. When you were talking about the signatures, was that in all practice settings?
Oh, it will be. Yeah,
Okay.
There'll be as much clarification as possible on that.
And so are you anticipating, if appropriate, that you would actually make recommendations to maybe changes to the to this regulation?
You know, I'd love to be like Bob Mueller and say, but no, I anticipate that, yes.
Okay.
Okay. Public comment? Okay. 3, reporting of drug losses. The chair provides both state and federal requirement for reporting a drug loss. As noted, our board requires any drug loss be reported. However, at federal law, the DEA requires only the reporting of a significant loss. At both committee meetings and board meetings, members have considered that what changes, if any, could be made to the board's drug loss reporting requirement. I remind everyone present that we have received previous advice and we cannot take the same approach as the DEA. Such a change cannot be implemented because of the requirements of the Administrative Procedures Act. Provided in the chair report are summary data regarding drug losses along with additional data in attachment 3, where you'll find the provision of additional information regarding the types of losses that fall into the 1 to 100 dosage unit range. With this new data, as committee chair, I'm going to be working with the staff to determine what changes should be made, and we'll report back to the committee with recommendations for its consideration. The staff has come up with a number of ideas that might make reporting a little more manageable for both the staff and for the practitioners. Any comments from board members? From the Gee, oh, sorry. I welcome comments.
That's why I'm sitting next to you. In there, I was trying to look, so in the staff material, or in our packet, it said there's a report about the 1 to 100.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I saw
You
the
just passed
report.
it, I thought.
Well, this is a report of everything, so there's more than 100. Like here's 2,000. I was just curious what that was referencing, the report of quantities 1 to 100.
That's the number. That's the number of. Okay, so that is the number of reports that were received for that drug where the loss was
between
1 to
100. So I mean, I don't know. It might be, and maybe it'd be more information for your committee. To have like a second column that's like the rest of them, because I mean, so alprazolam. Well, that's not a good one. Amphetamine capsule. There was one report where it was between 1 to 100, but were there 50 other reports where it was more than 100?
Oh, so we can give comparison data if that's helpful. Yeah.
I mean, I think it would be.
Yeah, a little more parsing of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
You've had wonderful suggestions, and I look forward to the
Aren't you glad I'm not on your committee?
Okay. Any public comment?
Yeah, I mentioned this before. I would like to put on a next meeting agenda item that possible require any of those narcotic diversion to be mandatory, reported to the police for possible prosecution by the PIC.
Okay, we'll put it on the agenda for discussion. As I've mentioned before, there's a lot of impediments to the actuality of it. The idea I completely understand, but we'll talk about it again.
Okay.
Paige.
Paige Talley, California Council for the Advancement of Pharmacy. I have two comments, sort of questions. One is, when you're looking at the 1 to 100 or 0 to 100, whatever you are looking at, I want you to keep in mind that in long-term care, I have one pharmacy that's not huge, sort of medium, and his doses of controlled substances per month are 30,000 per month. So, you know, I really hope you take that into consideration when you're doing this, and I'll be back at the next committee meeting.
No, that's very, size, certainly.
But yeah, don't go there. But can you kind of explain what your point is?
Well, I thought you were.
He has a lot of controlled drugs, and so.
Well, it's long-term care. It's the senior population.
I
fragile
understand. So you're saying that
their inventory is so much larger than, say, Pucci's Pharmacy in Sacramento, which is a independent pharmacy, that the loss for them, maybe 100 would be a lot, but for long-term care, it's really
So I
not
guess I'm
that
asking,
much.
do you have a solution? I mean, so what's your solution?
Well,
I mean, how do you think we
liked the
how should we approach this?
DEA
Except we
idea.
can't do the DEA.
I know, but that was my next comment that I'll segue into that.
Okay.
I was looking at the Administrative Procedure Act. And so I'm assuming that the issue that Laura had mentioned was clarity, right? You're looking at clarity. And clarity in 11349.1 C is the office, I'm on the wrong one. Anyway, clarity means written or displayed so that the meaning of regulations will be easily understood by those persons directly affected by them, which would be pharmacists. And I understand that, okay, so you're thinking that, why are you going to leave it up to the pharmacy to decide how significant their drug loss is? However, why is it that the OAL allowed the compounding regs to leave it up to the PIC's professional judgment when deciding whether non-anti-neoplastics were hazardous? You know, just
What's your
throwing
point?
that out there. I'm just saying that I find it
We
peculiar.
need more regulation? I don't think that's it.
What?
I'm saying you're throwing somebody under the bus?
No. I'm just making a comparison of, there are times when the OAL will allow for professional judgment.
Well,
and why not in this case?
Okay. Well,
Because
we
you're gonna
can have more discussion on that. But when you're talking about maybe a 1% loss, in this case it's 300. Certainly, you can't argue that 300 shouldn't be reported. And so as you get it, and so somebody that's twice his size, 1% 600. If we say, oh, we can have a 1% loss, or where does significance count? And so the definition in the state law, I think, is more required than in the federal law. Nobody knows what's going on with the federal law. We'll have more discussion on it. But as far as, you know, coming up here and asking us, what do we mean by this, isn't productive. And so I want to make sure that, like my colleague here, that we have some, rather than asking us what the heck we're doing, have a solution in mind, have some suggestion, because we can be questioned to death. And this has been a point that we've had a variety of discussion on. I'm willing to discuss it more, certainly. But, you know, questioning what is meant by people that have made other decisions that, you know, we don't have a good grasp on that. We're following the regulations that are in place now. Those regulations we're questioning, they're unmanageable in a lot of cases, and they're unfair, to my mind. And so I want to make time making progress rather than being held to details.
Okay, I was just asking for
I know you're just asking, but
Yeah.
I don't feel that's making progress.
Okay, fine, thank you.
Here's the man with the answers. All right.
Steve Gray is an individual pharmacist. As I understand it, maybe you can clarify.
I doubt it.
The discussion at the meeting was about changing the regulation to match the DEA criteria for reporting losses. So there were criteria, none of which were absolutely controlling. And I believe that the advice you got was that the OAL would need more specifics because it was a regulation. But I think, and maybe I just don't remember it, there was also discussion then about taking the OAL out of the picture, since there is so much logic to and supporting legislation of which the OAL would not be a factor. Was that discussed? In other words, is that the answer you said I had as I walked up here? In other words, removing this issue as a regulation limitation by going to the legislature and saying that the standard for reporting losses is to follow the DEA regulation. And the reason I say this is because the board made a policy decision recently that it was going to follow USP 797, 795 by referring to them. Why not do the same thing in legislation and refer to the DEA's regulation, which is in fact more of law than USP is, as we discussed earlier today.
Right.
So was I wrong, or we didn't have that discussion?
No, that was discussed, Steve.
Okay, thanks. So this might be an agenda item for the legislation committee to take up and consider in order to get clarification on this. Thank you.
Would it be the legislation, or would it be back to this committee?
Yeah, so if sorry, can you hear me? Am I, so I believe that the committee discussed a couple of different ways to approach the issue. I think that there was general, I don't want to speak for the committee, but I think that there was general consensus that we should be re-looking to see what changes we should make. I don't think that the committee, I can go back and listen again, I don't think that the committee made a decision point that it's statute versus regulation, but I think that they are still in the exploratory phase, and that's why we're working with the chair to see what's going to make the best sense, and then we'll be reporting back to the enforcement committee what some recommendations are moving forward.
All right, but yeah, that's true. But Steve did bring that up, and we didn't report it. Yeah.
But it does seem like if one of the stakeholders has some suggestions.
Oh God,
they,
yes. Yeah.
Please write a letter and let us know what they are.
Oh yeah. I mean, this has been a problem.
Yeah, because it does seem like reporting onesies is craziness, but I don't know how you stop it. I mean, I don't know how you fix it.
Right. More public comment?
Christine Burskell with Dynalabs. Besides being an analytical lab, we also deal with hospitals across the country related to diversion. There was a recent incident in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, where a nurse diverted, one at a time, over 900 vials of fentanyl. She went to another hospital in Eau Claire, and she was caught there. She had already taken, one at a time, 200 vials. So I think that it needs to be reported because people who divert are very good at it, and they might just take one here and there. And I think that it's important to make sure that it's being reported to the board.
Oh, yeah, make sure you make your comments during our discussion. Be sure and bring that back.
And that one at a time, do you know, because I'm thinking that the average pharmacy is probably not reporting like one pill's missing this day. They're probably doing their counts every so often.
Yeah, this was more related to injectable
Right,
products.
I understand that,
Yeah.
but, so that vial, I mean, so like over a week, would she like steal one every time she was on duty, so over a week it was 4 or 5?
I don't have the details. I'm just heard about it. I can read that and certainly get back to you at the next meeting. Yep.
More public comment? Alternative disciplinary process, number 4. As you may recall, during our last report to the board, our committee previously received a presentation from CPHA regarding an alternative enforcement model. As a committee, we did not agree with the presentation, but requested that staff work on a possible alternative. During our meeting, we received a brief presentation from staff on the basic tenets of a possible enforcement model. As part of the presentation, staff advised that additional work would be necessary to implement such a proposal, but staff requested feedback from the committee and the board on the general concept and direction to confirm the basic framework is consistent with the board's intent and policy goal. The board chair provides the basic steps. The board's chair report provides the basic steps of the framework. Any questions on the framework from the board members?
Yes, I have a question.
Oh, good, Debbie. I was hoping you might.
So where does stipulations, that's the only thing I didn't quite understand is, today we have, they either, so would stipulations be part of the Office of Attorney General? So this would be before that. So this would be, or I don't know who I'm looking at. Yeah, so when you look at this, alternative route, no. So draft pleading, so then you have a hearing proposed or a settlement reached. So is settlement reached, is that the stipulations?
No, over here, this is the...
No, that's the alternative method.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So I'm saying-
Settlement is the stipulation route where there's, under how we currently function, there's a draft pleading, and then you can either settle it through a stipulation, or it goes to hearing and there's a proposed decision.
So I'm trying to figure out what are we doing different?
Would you like me to?
No, I'd love it.
Okay. So one of the primary differences is that there is no draft pleading in the alternative enforcement model. So really what it does is it goes straight to the resolution, which gets to the time and cost factors that the board has expressed concern with. So there would be some sort of finding of facts that's agreed upon, but really where you're getting is that you're allowed to go straight to consideration of mitigation, the investigation, those kinds of findings, and reach a settlement outcome through a stipulation in a different and more efficient fashion, should people choose to do it. Right? We don't want to deny anybody their due process. That is not what this is about at all. But this is about for someone that's like, yeah, okay, I want to avail myself of this opportunity to reach a settlement and just be done with the issue. This creates a different avenue to allow that.
So currently what happens is you do the draft pleading, and then they're availed the ability to settle before they go to a hearing.
So if they file a notice of defense, which is essentially saying, I want to contest these or whatever, right? Otherwise, you get a default decision. You all
Right.
see default decisions as well. So once the pleading is filed, they can file a notice of defense, which then there's an opportunity to settle the case or go to hearing, and they can avail themselves of both of them.
But that was a more costly alternative as well, the original.
Right.
So but I know with stipulation currently, part of the stipulation is I'm guilty, now I'm settling. So with this alternative method, do we still have I'm guilty and I'm settling? Or are we not going to be able to point back and say,
So I think that we're trying to get basic tenets right now. In my mind, on your stipulations, sometimes there are what are called hard admissions, where you're like, yep, I did it, and this is how it's. Sometimes there's soft admissions or reserved admissions, so you don't always have the, yes, I did it, kind of. I'm oversimplifying, so I'm not trying to be I'm just oversimplifying for purposes of the discussion. I believe that in this alternate resolution method, there's going to have to be some sort of findings of facts, whether that's through a consent order or it's memorialized through the notice of violation. I think we don't have those mechanics yet, but yes, I believe that there has to be some sort of, this is what occurred, and then this is how we're resolving it.
And we're in agreement, whether it be a hard or a soft or whatever.
Yeah.
So that part will kind of still remain the same.
Yes, but I do not believe that it needs to be in a pleading fashion. I think we can simplify through either the notice where we're letting them know about the alternative resolution. Look, these are the items that you've previously been identified. This is what we're talking about. So we're all in the same ballpark.
And then also this will be reviewed by a board member. And
No, I
he will
understand
review.
that. I like that part of it.
Good.
And I have no question to that part of it.
Oh, all right.
Right now.
I know. You reserve the right. Yes, okay. Okay, public comment.
Good afternoon, board members. Danny Martinez with the California Pharmacists Association. You all should have a letter that we submitted on this issue. Hope you all have had time to read it. I want to start off by saying thank you to the board, thank you to the staff for allowing an alternate disciplinary process to even be possible. As I mentioned during the enforcement committee, several other states have some sort of method to either have a case where a pharmacist can just kind of say their piece to either a couple of board members or in some cases the executive officer. We didn't really see that in California, and some of the cases that we were made aware of were becoming very costly to the point where a licensee was referred to the Attorney General, and instead of being able to, I think kind of goes to what you were asking earlier, instead of being able to just say, yes, I did it, or yes, let's take care of this, they had to go through the entire process of hiring an attorney, and spending thousands of dollars, travel costs, and when they could have just taken care of that initially. Relating to the letter that you all have, I initially was under the impression that we were actually going to be voting on this today, but for purposes of referring it back to committee, we're okay with that as well. I do want to make a couple of comments in addition to what I've written here in the letter, and I don't know if any of you have feedback for me on that, but in addition to this, one of the things that we'd also like this board to take into consideration is the factor of having perhaps a bigger size of board members hearing this alternate process. And what we were suggesting initially was perhaps the enforcement committee could serve as that group of folks who instead of the the two board members and the executive officer, to add a little bit more to that, and there's precedent in that in other states, which I know some folks are here who could probably speak better to that than I can, where they actually have entire committees of what we're calling an alternate disciplinary process, allows them to do it. So something to keep in mind as we're going back to the committee to possibly discuss. But I'd love to see if you guys have any feedback for me on this on the letter that we submitted, and whether you guys are comfortable heading that direction.
Well, I'm sorry I keep apologizing for having questions, but I do.
You're limited to two, Debbie.
What's that?
You're two.
3
so
minutes.
I guess, the CPHA letter, a lot of times they change a lot of the substantiated to kind of alleged violations. Have you had a chance to look at the CPHA letter? So what are your thoughts? Because I don't know from the legal point of view if that make sense or not, does it make sense?
I don't have, well, I think I didn't prepare a lot of responses because my understanding is that this item at this point was going to be referred back to committee.
Right.
And so that's where we would have, the committee would sort of pursue, and then we would be able to give the advice about the merits of those. But certainly there are points that can be discussed, and I mean, it's all on the table, I think, is.
Yeah,
You know, if you're drafting statute, you have a lot of options.
We'll just let it go back to Dr. Shad's
Yeah.
able hands. But we used to have office conferences. So do you remember? Can you just refresh my memory? It was before I was on the board.
It does predate me.
Oh, does
I'm just
it?
gonna say no. Well, whatever. So it's my understanding that there were office conferences for citations, not for disciplinary matters, but for citations. And so they had Southern office conferences and Northern office conferences where there was a public appeal. It was a public meeting where there was a public appeal of the citation itself. And I believe that two board members or one board member was involved in that, in the resolution of those public meetings where they would consider the appeals. But I am not aware of there ever being any kind of office conference appeal for a disciplinary matter.
And I think kind of that's what our point is that we feel that there should be, maybe not an office conference in the way that citations are done, but for something like that to provide an opportunity to go before, kind of a body of their peers kind of thing. So that's.
Oh, good. We can have more discussion on that, and I indeed am not facetious when I say I look forward to that.
Thanks.
I just want to thank the Enforcement Committee and management for moving so rapidly on this. It's really, really important. The way the system is now, if you are charged with discipline, you have to go. If you want to tell your side of the story, you have to go to trial. And that costs between $100,000 to $200,000, plus you have to pay the fees of the Board of Pharmacy. This is not fair. What you did here is going to make it fair. You're going in the correct direction, and I highly recommend 3 board members to review this. And if you need experts in we'll discuss that later for compounding or whatever, I think you need it. But just like these are violations, and you can have an office conference, you should be able to have a basic type office conference for disciplinary matters. This is done all over the United States at all boards.
Just out of curiosity, why did you pick the number 3?
Well, just to break even, I would go 3 to 5. Most boards have a committee of 5 people, and they want to know what's going on. Why did you do what you did? And it gives you a chance to ask these questions, and so you understand more about enforcement of what's going on. It's done very well. I think there's a board member from Arizona here, if you get a chance to speak with him. But this is done at all boards across the United States, and that's a fair way of giving due process, which is our constitutional right.
Well, I guess my question is, we're proposing 2.
Oh,
why the
okay.
larger number?
Well, first of all, if you only have 2 board members, what if they both say, one says yes and the other one says no? You there now have a tie. So you should have 3 board members minimum. And again, I would recommend 5 or as many board members that want to come, the more the merrier. It's the more you learn about this, the more you can give good oversight, which of course is your job. Thank you.
Come on. Are you talking to somebody there more important than us? Oh, uh-huh.
So Bob's been furiously texting me, and hey, Bob. Everybody says hi. Yeah, say hi. Say hi to Bob. Hi, Bob. Hi, Bob. Hi, Bob. His first point was, and this was at 1:59, so now we're at 2:08. He says, there's no road for settlement terms by the board because the board has not been amenable to terms.
Say again?
Settlement terms. The reason that there isn't any settlement terms on discipline is because the board has not been amenable to them. And then he said past actions by the board have shown no interest in pre-hearing settlement terms. Then he makes this comment that he would like settlement terms to be transparent between the Board of Pharmacy and the licensee, and for it to be timely. And then he finally says office conferences were not allowed in statutes. So I don't know if that's passed. I texted him back still. Ron Dietrich, who was I guess he's still a DAG. Is he still a DAG? Anybody know? No? Anyway, he said there's no provision for office conferences in the statutes. So.
Maybe you can ask him to clarify, why wouldn't it be transparent? I would think that if they're
Well-
going to sign a letter that, why is it not transparent?
There have been, well, I'm sitting on the other side now. So what I have seen in some cases, not all, but some cases, the communication between the board or the Deputy Attorney General's office has been poor. And attorneys who are representing clients have called me and said, I can't get anybody to return my calls regarding settlement terms. So that's what he's referring to. I'm just talking to you from the other side. Now, I'm not saying good or bad, I'm just saying it has been rather challenging sometimes. You know, and Ann made the point earlier on, every single case is different. You can't throw them all in together in one bag and say, this is what we're going to do. But in some cases, there was a really good case to be made for some of the pharmacists who had accusations against them, for them to be relieved of those accusations. But it was like pulling teeth to finally get the DAG to come back to us and then go back to the board and then come back. And there would be weeks that would go in between communications.
I just want to interject here. I am from the Office of Attorney General, and we always strive to convey all of our settlement terms in timely manners. So, I don't know what specific situations you're talking
Well, this
about.
one attorney had to go above the Deputy Attorney General who was assigned to the case. So who's ever above that person? And then some action started
Well,
happening.
we represent clients, and so we effectively convey those.
I'm not
settlement
saying,
terms.
it wasn't me personally, it was the clients of these attorneys, and they would call me and be
You're
frustrated.
just a messenger.
Yeah.
Just a poor messenger.
Exactly. I'm the poor messenger, that's all I'm saying. So, but yeah, I mean, I would agree with you. In general terms, yes, I would agree with you. So, anyway, I'm done, thanks. Oh, Holly Strom, former president of the Board of Pharmacy and CEO of Strom and Associates LLC.
Okay, more public comment out there.
And just to add to the conversation, because there's been comments about the numbers of members, one of the things that the Enforcement Committee heard about, and I'm sure we'll continue to hear about during the further discussion, is the impact on the number of members that participate in that process and the way that that could impact either unsuccessful negotiations and what would happen after that. So just for the members' edification, you guys hear me all the time asking people not to share specifics of complaints because we don't want you to be tainted. So there's similar concerns about using members in that, and that's one of the things that the Enforcement Committee has heard from me and from Josh, and also it will just continue to be part of the discussion. So.
Well, and I think the proposal has 3 people. It's 2 board members and the executive officer or interim executive officer. So we do actually have 3. So we would break a tie, because I think that was one of the reasons that they wanted more than 2. So just saying, and that's why I wait. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay, the proposal is a basic framework at this point, and we're going to get guidance from the public and from the board on the concept. The committee agrees that the direction of the work of the so a proposal is being offered that the staff recommends that the staff have more authority to work with the committee chair on items discussed during the meeting and bring a revised proposal back to the committee to have more discussion. So is that a movement? Is that a motion? That's a motion. Is it a motion? Need to be a motion? I don't think we need a motion.
I think if there's general consensus with
Yeah.
the process moving forward and the board agrees with the basic framework or where the direction that we're heading so that the chair knows the board's preference.
No one down there's talked? No, I don't think we need to. No, let's move right ahead. 5, FAQs on the Ask Inspector program. As indicated in the chair report, the committee deferred the review of the draft FAQs. However, members of the public were requested to submit their comments in writing to allow for research in advance of the next committee meeting. The draft of the FAQs are in attachment 5. Any comments from the board members? Public members? All in agreement on that. Looking forward to that meeting. Okay. So number 6, posting an individual licensee's address of record. Under California law, the address of record of board licensees is public information. With the exception for interns, this information is currently posted on the Board of Pharmacy's website. Such information has been posted since December 2003. During our meeting, the committee received a significant comment about the potential risk to licensees when their address of record is made available. As a committee, we question if this may be appropriate to remove the information from our website. Recognize that by law, the board is required to release information if requested. As a committee, we believe it's appropriate to reassess the board's policy and determine what changes can be made at both policy level as well as from a technological standpoint. As chair of the committee, I'll be working with the staff in advance of the next meeting to develop different options for the committee's consideration. Any comment? Comments? Come on up.
Jerry Green, San Diego Compounding Pharmacy. Just real quickly, we live in a different world now, and we live in a world of technology, and anyone who wants to find you can find you. I think that it would be prudent of the board to protect its pharmacists the best you can, and we all know you can't protect us because I can Google any one of you and find your home address, including a Google map on how to get to you. But we live in a world of people who are desperate times. You're very, very concerned about how many controlled substances do we lose a month, what's significant, what's insignificant, robberies and things of that nature. We have all the technology to set up portals for pharmacists who are registered with the board. By your regulation, we must be on your email list to get emails. And if a patient or a consumer wants to get in touch with us, they should be able to get in touch with us through the board's portal, of which we have the responsibility, if we want to check to see if we have messages. It's just a button that needs to be pushed, and there's no reason anyone in this room has to have their personal address out there on the board website.
Thank you. All right. No more comment? Oh, one more.
Steve Gray, individual pharmacist, and also on behalf of CSHP. We kind of brought this to the committee, and thankful the committee gave a good discussion about it, and I can see going forward. But what it gets down to is there's a regulation that this board adopted that basically says that the intern pharmacist's address of record does not have to be posted on the website. All it takes is a motion from you to direct staff to modify that regulation to add pharmacists and others that might be at risk. That's all it takes. And then that is implemented, because if it's legal do not post the licensee as an intern, then it's also legal to post the licensee of a pharmacist. But there are other people at risk now. Think about your designated representatives for warehouses, where they have tens of millions of dollars of controlled substances, 3PLs, emergency medicine designees, et cetera. The reality is, and maybe I'm the only one in the room that's old enough to remember, but I remember as a student, pharmacist, there was a owner, manager of a pharmacy in the Fairfax district of Southern California who was kidnapped from his home, taken to the pharmacy, made to open it, beaten severely. Fortunately, he wasn't killed. I know that there was a wholesaler where the pharmacist was the designated representative. In other words, you can be a designated representative as a pharmacist as well. There was a wholesaler in Southern California that was also followed from his home to the warehouse because he was the first one to open it up, and he was made to open it up and then immediately injected with a huge dose of Valium injection once they got inside. And so the risk is huge to some people, and it's rare. I admit it's rare, but the risk is unnecessary. Yes, that information is public information, but let's make people go through a Freedom of Information Act or something if they want a PIC or a designated pharmacist in charge. Make them go through some kind of extra process. The really desperate bad guys aren't going to do that. Or if they go through the process, they're going to have to reveal who they are and why. So I would suggest that, yes, maybe it needs more discussion from a technology point of view, but it's very simple. Just make a motion, second it, and vote, and direct staff to prepare that regulation. This is an urgent matter. In the APHA meeting in Seattle, it was one of the main topics of discussion of the robberies that are occurring across the United States because of the opioid epidemic. It's particularly important for hospitals because if you really want to know where the cachet, other than the warehouse, where the cachet of Schedule II items are, it's in the hospitals. And every pharmacist in charge or every pharmacist who has a key to that hospital pharmacy is at risk for being forced to go into those hospitals and get that information. So I think it's a relatively easy thing to fix, a quick thing to fix, and it shouldn't be delayed. Thank you.
So you paid attention when I said come up with an answer.
Yes.
Very.
So Ann, today, if someone calls the board and requests an address for an intern, would we provide it? Because it says for pharmacists, it's provided upon request.
It's provided by law whenever we receive a request. The difference is we do not post the intern's address of record currently on our website because of the regulation, whereas we post the address of record for all of the others.
And I feel like it needs to be said. I know I said it many times during the committee meeting, but your address of record doesn't have to be a home address. And as a matter of fact, the licensees, whatever they are, whether they're pharmacists, whether they're designated reps, whether they're techs, can provide an alternate address. They can provide a P.O. box, and that's the whole point of that article in the script that's in your materials. So the address of record is not necessarily a home address, and it does not need to be a home address, and it's explicitly permitted not to be a home address. So that's number one. Number two is that, and this is more technical, but if a Public Records Act request comes into the board from a member of the public, there's no requirement that the member of the public identify themselves. So we can't require that. If somebody walks in and says, I'd like the address of record for this person, we can't say, give us your name so we can track you. It's not permitted.
But is there a problem with us just proposing to just, as Steve was suggesting, so that they would have to make that phone call?
Legally, no. I just want it to be clear that the information is still going to be available, and that it doesn't, right now, it doesn't necessarily mean that the addresses that are being posted are home addresses. So, I think the message should remain that if you don't want your home address or your residence address to be available to the public, that you should provide an alternate address of record.
But I would prefer not to have to get a PO box. Can we just not have it be there?
You're talking about, so the posting versus yeah, I understand what you're saying. But it's still,
Laura, I think it is, not to speak for you, but is offering another alternative if you wanted to have another level.
Well, I prefer an alternative of it not being posted on the website at all.
and that is, right now, it's legally possible for this board.
And we'll talk
There are
about
other
it.
boards that must post.
I propose that, that we do not have to post the address of pharmacists and other licensees. Can I make that a motion?
Sure.
I'll second it.
Okay.
All right.
So any more public comment?
Oh, wait a minute, I have a look from Ann here. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
What would staff prefer on this?
No, so I think I just need a little bit of clarification on what the motion is. Is the motion to remove them from the, like, is it to remove them from the website? Is the motion to be pursuing some sort of a change in the law? I think we need to look at what the agenda is to see what we can and cannot do. So I guess it would just be helpful to have a little more clarity on what we're doing.
I thought it was just a matter of us,
I thought Laura just said we can just do it.
yeah, we just asked Laura that. I thought that
So you
question was
remove it from
answered.
the website.
Let's just a second here. Bob has the answer.
Well, I agree that simply by modifying that regulation that currently forbids interns to be posted on the internet, intern licenses to be, or addresses to be posted on the internet, that it's basically just a logical extension of that for the reasons I think that have been well articulated. With respect to the alternative ways that can be done, I don't think it's reasonable to expect a pharmacist to have to take extra actions to purchase a PO box in order to protect their safety.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
And Cheryl, your motion is not only just for pharmacists, but for techs, for designated representatives, for, I mean, facility addresses should be up there, but personal addresses,
I
right?
think,
Yes, thank you, Debbie.
so all individuals.
I have a point of clarification then. I understand the intent under the motion, but what are the specific tasks that are included and that we're authorized to do? That's where I'm confused. Because it sounds like there is a regulation, so that has to be going through a regulatory change process. Is that correct? I'm just.
No, Laura just answered
I
that
don't
question.
think it would need a regulatory change.
So the current information about licensees having an address of record on a website is mandated how? Is it in a regulation? Is it just a policy?
Just a policy or?
So it's an acknowledgement, generally speaking, it's an acknowledgement that the address of record is public. It is public, no matter whether or not it's posted on the website or not. It's public information. It's available
So
under
what
the
we're
Public
talking about
Records
is
Act.
just removing it from the website, but it would continue to be publicly available.
Correct.
By telephone.
Yes, it would be subject to a Public Records Act request under the government law. So they would be allowed to make a request in writing or by telephone for the address of record for a specific individual licensee.
But right now, it's just a policy matter, right?
Whether to post
Whether to
is a
post or not.
policy.
So
Right.
the motion
There-
is to change the policy and not post it.
And I think to clarify that historically, other DCA boards and bureaus have been required by statute to do so.
But we are not.
The board is not one of those at this time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great.
So my motion stands.
Okay. Any more
Moved and
public
seconded.
comment? No? All right, let's call for the vote. All those in favor of the motion, raise your hand. Unanimous? Okay. Passes. Very good. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Okay, on presentation on the board's jurisdiction in enforcement matters. During our meeting, we received a presentation of the board's jurisdiction in enforcement matters regarding pharmacies operating under common ownership or management. As part of the presentation, it was noted that because the board regulates at site level, it is difficult to address a practice that is facilitated at ownership level, noting that this is especially true with items such as policies and procedures. The committee questioned if the solution is changing how we regulate the practice and if we should consider issuing a license to the enterprise owner. Ultimately, our committee determined that this issue requires further evaluation and discussion. It was suggested that it would be appropriate to evaluate this issue as part of this board's sunset report. So with this committee's recommendation, which will serve as a motion, the recommendation is that this be forwarded to the Organizational Development Committee for an issue to be included in the sunset review. Any comments from members? All right. Board comment?
So any comments from the board members, first of all? Comments from the public? Okay.
Stan Goldenberg, pharmacist, former board member also, and just wanted to go back to the previous discussion where the vote was to allow all licensees not to have their address. Will you be sending some type of procedure on how are you going to handle that change? Will the pharmacists need to notify you that they want their names taken off? Or how is the process going to work? Or is that going to be part of a future discussion of a meeting?
I would just take them off.
So,
Do you think somebody wants theirs on?
It's just on the website.
I'm just asking so that
My understanding is
constituents
that
ask.
we're just going to remove them.
I mean, I think it's just on the website, so we'll
Yeah.
still have to have an address of record.
Oh, I understand that. I just wanted to follow through. So when people ask, well, do I have to contact the board
No.
to take my name off?
I think we're taking all the addresses off.
Okay, so that would be within a fairly short period of time then. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stan.
And thank you very much for doing this, by the
so,
way.
yeah, I think I would defer to the executive officer about the logistics because I believe it involves working with DCA's IT shop. And
Okay.
there may be some programming involved.
I'm sure it'll be simple. I'm sure it'll be simple.
So that could be slower, but maybe it won't be very slow.
Okay, discussion on statutory proposal regarding citation. More?
Yeah, you had a committee
I have to
motion
vote on that?
that was about
Yes.
common ownership
Okay.
and referral to the org development
No,
committee.
right. So it's moved and seconded.
No public comments on this one, right? Okay. All those in favor of the motion?
It's unanimous.
Unanimous. Passes.
Now can I go on?
Thank you.
Discussion on a statutory proposal regarding citations as a non-disciplinary action. As included in the chair report, the board routinely advised requesting parties that citations do not constitute discipline. However, it appears that other regulators may have a different may apply a different meaning to this board's action. While the board's letter of admonishment provisions explicitly state that a letter of admonishment shall not be construed as a disciplinary action, there is no similar provision within the board's existing citation statutes. The committee considered a statutory proposal that would mirror the letter of admonishment provision for citations. Members, Attachment 7 includes the proposal being recommended by the committee. Specifically, the committee recommends to the board the sponsorship of a statutory change to amend BPC section 4314. So this serves as a motion. Any comments?
If I could just, the comment is that the other regulators may not see it the same way, and I believe the other regulators that we're talking about are outside the state, because one of the things that we talked about at the committee meeting is that within DCA and its regulatory licensing agencies, there's a California Supreme Court case that basically establishes
Right.
this same policy. So for DCA, in DCA world, it's universal that citations issued from a DCA agency are not disciplinary.
Thank you for fleshing that out. Yes. Okay.
So that's the committee's motion. Do we have any public comments?
So
Okay.
actually, I do have a question. So by adding this section E, then we would include that in letters, just like we do letters of admonishment, or in the citation that would be stated?
So we,
Is that what the committee has determined?
What's that?
You know, that, we haven't discussed that, rather it be included. You're saying the statement.
Yeah, because it sounds like in the order of abatement, there's a statement that actually says this should not be, isn't that what the chair report said?
Well, you know, what it said here with, it says,
explicitly
with the
states.
board's letter of admonishment provisions.
so that means specifically the statutory authority for the,
Oh, okay.
for the letters of admonishment has a provision. We don't have one for the citation. So
Okay.
we were really talking about it from the policy level, but from an implementation standpoint, should the statute go through, we could absolutely include a sentence in the thing. Part of the reason that we brought this forward was it's not uncommon for us to receive calls from individuals that have received a citation and they're requesting letters to indicate that it's not discipline for purposes of the board. And so we want to be able to just point to the statute because we think that that will provide a little additional clarity on the board's position of what it constitutes.
So I'm wondering if maybe actually in the citation, maybe we have a little disclaimer down
Yeah.
at the bottom, prevent phone calls so that you don't.
Good idea.
point.
No, that's a great idea. Another great idea.
Excuse me, what'd you say?
I'd like to have in the minutes.
Do we don't
Another.
need a motion for that part of it, though. Okay, so, Steve?
Steve Gray is an individual pharmacist. I applaud this. I support it. I would like to see one addition, and I think it can be made a part of the motion. And that is also, some states consider our orders of correction to be discipline. So could we expand this motion to not only include the citation and fine provisions, but also the orders of correction? It gets crazy outside, but you know, we've talked to other state boards of pharmacy, we've talked to other licensees, we've even talked to Medi-Cal, and if the statute in California says it's not discipline, they tend to accept that. There are a few that may not, as counsel said. But I think that the motion should be amended to also include that language, that this is not discipline in orders of correction.
Thank you. Since that was a committee motion, can we alter that committee motion?
So I'm going to get a little bit even
If you
more
want.
basic than that, and it's not on the agenda that way. So
Oh,
you're restricted
can't
for
do
that
it.
reason.
Okay, we can bring that up
other-
at another time then.
Yeah,
Well,
we can look.
in the
Okay.
future. We're looking to the future.
Wasn't agendized, so we have to wait. Okay, all those in favor of the motion? Unanimous. Thank you. Move on.
Okay. Number 9, a review of the committee strategic goals. Detailed in the chair report are each of the goals for the committee as well as the status of the action taken. As part of the discussion, the committee reviewed each goal to determine if any additional action should be taken. I note that as a committee, we've requested more data on violations for failure to provide patient consultation and look forward to receiving this information in future meetings. I don't intend to read each one, but would like to know if members have any comments on any of these.
So I saw PIC.
Uh-huh.
Let's see, it's part of the public. So I can't remember what in SB 476 is happening as far as PIC. Do you know, Ann?
So that was a bill that was going to, it evolved, it started in one capacity, but before it was stalled in committee, it was to, I believe, establish a task force to assess the role of the, I'm not correctly stating
Right.
it exactly, but it was a task force to assess the role of the PIC. And I believe it dealt with like the liability piece. I'd have to pull up the bill, but it was the legislature looking at a task force for that purpose.
Now, and that was Stone's bill, right?
Yes.
It's a 2-year bill, but anyway, as that's not the entirety of what the goal is. The goal was to look at the responsibility and the power that the PIC has and balance that out more. Sometimes the board felt that the PIC had too much responsibility, and so part of the goal is to look at that and to continue to look at that. We haven't looked at it enough, but it's part of the ongoing goal.
I guess with that, it's giving some of the liability to others in the pharmacy who are signing off and performing tests, right?
It's part of that's going to be part of the discussion. Up and down. Yeah. Okay. And as part of the discussion, we reviewed each goal to determine what action should be taken. Excuse me here. Okay. As noted in the chair report, the committee is recommending removal of strategic goal 2.6. Quote, collaborate with stakeholders to identify and expand resources for technicians who experience substance abuse and provide assistance in recovery. We've looked into this. We don't have any. We found that it's almost futile to move forward with this. Our time can be better spent on other goals that will protect the public more. And so we'd like to move that this be taken from those strategic goals.
Okay, that's the committee's motion. Do we have any comments from board members? Any comments from the public? Okay, all those in favor of the committee's motion, raise your hands.
Okay.
Unanimous? Thank you.
Okay. Enforcement statistics, as noted in the chair report, during the meeting, the committee noted that continued reduction in investigation times. A review of case closure times in the past years indicated that 64% of the board's field investigations were closed within a year, 31% were closed within 1 to 2 years, and the remaining 5 were closed in over 2 years. It's important to note that this does not include cases that were referred to the Office of Attorney General. I believe the fiscal year comparisons for all enforcement statistics will be covered as part of the organizational development report later in the meeting. Any comments from the members? Tell me no.
No.
Comments from the public?
Nope.
No. All right, future committee dates. I believe it's necessary to convene another meeting prior to November 5. September 25 has been identified as the date, and members and the staff will be following up to confirm availability.
Okay.
Oh, and before you close the enforcement committee, just to clarify so that it doesn't create more work, is that an order of correction is already not available as a public record under 4083 subdivision G. So
Okay.
take that off your list.
That's
Okay.
interesting. Okay.
So does that conclude your report?
That concludes the report.
Thank you, Ellen. Let's take a 10-minute break.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah. Thank you. Next, I'm going to turn this over to Maria Serpa, who's the chair of our compounding committee, for her report. Maria?
Must turn on the microphone. That might be helpful. If you can't hear me at any time, please do raise your hand or say something. I have a long presentation, and part of that is to thank you for your patience and for attending this part of the board meeting, because it will be a long presentation. So I'd like to thank you in advance. On behalf of the Compounding Committee, I'm happy to report on the recent activities of our committee. As indicated in the meeting materials, our committee has met twice since our last report to the board. On June 5th, we continued our education on the application of USP chapters. Specifically, the June meeting focused on the education on Chapter 825, Radiopharmaceuticals. The draft minutes from the meeting were included as a supplement to the meeting materials. In advance of the educational presentation, several committee members had the opportunity to tour a radiopharmaceutical compounding facility. I'd like to thank PetNet for the tour, as well as Paul Mahan, who provided the educational presentation to the committee. Mr. Mahan was a member of the expert panel responsible for the development of USP Chapter 825. This is for information only. Are there any board member comments? Okay. Any comments from the public? The next item is for discussion and action. During our July meeting, the committee considered draft regulations that may be necessary to provide clarity on USP 795 chapter, as well as pursue regulations that are necessary to ensure safe processes and patient safety, consistent with the board's consumer protection mandate. I remind everyone present that the board's statutory mandate is consumer protection. While the board should not While the board should not be arbitrary in the development of regulations, it is incumbent upon the board to pursue this requirement. As a regulatory agency, we are developing a regulation proposal necessary for patient safety. While USP represents the minimal national standard, this board should consider regulations beyond this minimal standard. Let that sink in. As I shared with the committee, it is my recommendation that if the board determines regulations are necessary, promulgation of any regulation mirror the structure of USP chapters, including separate requirements for the various types of compounding preparations. Further, rather than completing one rulemaking package that encompasses all regulations for each of the USP chapters, I recommend, as regulations for each respective chapter is finalized, that the initiation of a formal rulemaking process begin. This will allow for a more immediate transition to the new chapters and regulations. So what that means is we're going to be taking each concept under USP separately. So today we're going to be discussing the concepts under USP 795. I'm pleased to report that our meeting on July 11th was very productive. We received lots of public comment indicating how well the meeting went not only for the board but for the public. As indicated in the chair report, the meeting was quite extensive and excluded significant public comment. There was also significant collaboration during the course of the meeting. The regulation language that we will be reviewing today represents language agreed to through a consensus of the committee. Public comment was thoroughly considered, and in many instances, as a result of public comment, changes were made. As we begin our review during this meeting, I would like you to note that some of the information Acting President Lippy included in his opening remarks, most notably that committee meetings provide an opportunity for stakeholder involvement, have proved very helpful in the development process. As we proceed today, I respectfully request that comments that are provided to the board today be limited to those comments not previously raised and considered by the committee. The draft minutes from the meeting were provided to the members, all of whom who have had an opportunity to review the minutes in advance. I thank everyone for your cooperation because this will be a process the next couple of hours here. Yeah, I'll mention it. That's fine. Sorry about that.
Just so you don't think I was having a private conversation here. I was supposed to mention at the beginning that all public comments are going to be taken at the end of her presentation instead of during it. So I just told her that I messed up and didn't do it. So now you know.
I would like to acknowledge the receipt of comments submitted by CPHA before this meeting. I note that several of the comments included in the letter have already been considered when presented by CPHA during the previous meeting. Also, some of the comments in the language, some of the comments reflect language previously changed and amended through the consensus process of the committee. I will make note in my report to you any comments that were not previously discussed. So just to make sure that that's clear, all of you have seen a letter that was submitted in very detail by CPHA. In the letter, there were many comments that were already discussed during the committee meeting, and some of those things have changed already, so those comments in the letter are out of date. So we'll be discussing them as we go through them one section at a time, to tell you and to repeat what things have already changed and what things are brand new that were in the letter and were not discussed at the meeting, and we'll emphasize those today. Members, as we begin discussion on the proposed amendments to regulations related to pharmaceutical compounding of non-sterile preparations, note that the meeting materials included 2 documents for this discussion today. One document is the regulation proposal being recommended for approval today to initiate the rulemaking process. The second document includes the same language in addition to a brief statement on each section necessitating the changes to that section. As we move forward with the discussion, I would like to discuss each section one at a time and respond to any comments or questions from the board members. Supervising Inspector Christina Costa is also available and ready to provide assistance as needed. There's Arvana. It is my intention to cover each section with the board members. After the board has completed its review of the entire proposal, I suggest public comment be taken at the end, after a full motion of the board. This will allow members of the public to comment on the motion, including all of the language being discussed today. So that's a lot to say in the beginning. Mike, I wanted to make sure everyone understood what process we're going to be moving forward with and to answer any questions about the process. Danny.
And Danny Martinez with CPHA. So on the process, I believe I heard you say that if the item was discussed during the committee, that public comment would not necessarily be given for items that were discussed at the meeting. Is that my understanding of what you?
In some ways, yes, but I think to clarify that items that were previously discussed, duly considered during the committee meeting, may not be the best use of your 3 minutes of time.
Understand. The only reason I ask is because several of the folks who are here in the crowd didn't receive the meeting minutes, so they didn't know what happened at the committee other than what we've told them happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't believe it's fair that they don't get to comment on something that may have been duly noted during the committee, but weren't given a chance to actually provide commentary.
Right. So I understand your concern and your consideration. One of the challenges is that we do not want to repeat the entire committee meeting that took, was it 5 or 6 hours, as we work together as a group, and so we cannot repeat the entire event, but we'll take that into consideration during public comment, because public comment is open for all comments by all members of the public.
The other thing I want to clarify is that during the meeting, there were comments that I made where there were some questions that arose from the comments that I made a commitment to then bring to this committee, to the full board for clarification, which is reflected in that letter. And yes, I understand that there's some of the items that are in the letter that have been changed. I notated that a little bit late, and I apologize for that. But I would like an opportunity for some of those comments to be made, given the fact that I made a commitment to come and answer some of those questions that were asked by committee members.
So some of those comments are reflected in the discussion as we go through each of the sections. Take notes,
Yes.
and if anything is missed, please do bring them up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions about the process before we begin? Great, I'm looking forward to this part. Okay, we're going to start with section 1735, entitled Compounding in Licensed Pharmacies. Members, I trust you've had an opportunity to review this section. As you're aware, this first section, items A through J, set forth some of the general framework, including the scope of compounding and non-sterile preparation in pharmacies. The proposed language represents the consensus reached during the committee meeting, as well as non-substantive changes made following the meeting. I will note that the definition of compounding was limited to such action that occurs in a pharmacy, as the board's jurisdiction does not include to other areas where compounding may occur, such as physician offices. Also, as indicated in the minutes, the committee considered comments from several individuals. As a part of the committee's discussion, we identified areas where FAQs would be helpful to the regulated public. In addition, some changes sought by commenters would have violated federal law and therefore were not included. The CPHA letter suggests changes to 1735A through E. Members, these comments were previously provided during the committee meeting and were responded to at that time. As an example, CPHA requested removal of 1735C. However, the letter does not reflect that the language has already been changed during the meeting. So that was one of the comments that was a little bit out of sync. It's a little bit out of date now. Are there any comments from the board on this section?
So I have a couple questions. I'm looking at starting on the electronic copy. So I'm starting on page 55, which has, I think, the items, and then the necessity, which I think is what you were talking about. That okay. I guess I'm looking at repackaging and reconstitution. So items B and C. And I remember reading through the notes that there was some questions about, sometimes you add flavors to medications so that, kids or sometimes even adults will take their medication. And it seems like that was potentially defined as compounding and was going to be impacted. And is that what's being referenced here? Like C, reconstitution in accordance with directions which have not been FDA approved are considered compounding and all requirements shall apply?
So that's actually two different issues, and I know Christine Acosta will speak to one of them, but the issue about FDA approved has to do with the concept of FDA approved labeling and packaging and information are sometimes not used in the entirety, and if it's not used in the entirety as approved by the FDA, that constitutes compounding. So you can't pick and choose certain parts of the package insert, for example, or the instructions, any change of such as that would require the documentation and fall under the regulations of compounding. But your question is more to addition of additional products like the flavoring. That's
Right.
kind of a separate question, and I think.
But before we go there, so I'm glad you kind of did that. Can you give me an example of when that would happen?
I think maybe Chief Inspector Acosta could give you a more specific example because I have not personally seen the package inserts in their entirety.
So the drafted 1735 section C would come into play for such things as compounding kits, where a repackager puts a bunch of FDA-approved products together. There's a kit out there that is not FDA-approved for Magic Mouthwash in particular. The directions, the BUD, all of those items haven't been reviewed by the FDA for safety and efficacy. That would be considered, it would be considered compounding the way that this is drafted. And in the chapter, it doesn't really address that clearly. So we felt it was necessary to put it very out there. Would you like me to address the flavoring agent as well?
Yeah, but let me ask you, so I'm thinking about Magic Mouthwash, and only because you brought it up, and I'm old as dirt, so I remember Magic Mouthwash, it's been around forever. So USP, when they put together 795, and I'm so far from an expert at compounding that I, please, excuse my total ignorance. But I always was so impressed with them because I thought that USP did such a great job of really looking at all the details and making sure all the science was there and making sure that everything was perfect. So I guess they didn't contemplate the scenario, for instance, of Magic Mouthwash.
So what they basically wrote in section 1.1 is reconstitution of a conventionally manufactured non-sterile product in accordance with the directions contained in the manufacturer approved labeling is not required to meet the standard of this chapter. So they didn't address when you're reconstituting per directions that are not FDA approved. There's nothing in the chapter that really addresses what it would be, but it is a practice that we see. Does that make sense? So the USP committee has a very difficult job. They have to write a standard to many, many different practices, inpatient, outpatient, doctor's offices, nurses, all kinds of things. So our particular practice, we see some different things than maybe they would have been able to address with the big scope of the chapter.
So just to restate that maybe in a different way, the way I understood it was that the USP information is perfectly clear on FDA-approved documents, but is silent on documents that are not approved by the FDA. So we took the position as a committee that we should provide some guidance on when your information is not FDA approved.
Okay.
Did I say that correctly?
Yes.
Okay, it's Dylan. Okay, now flavoring.
So we had a conversation at the committee about this as well. In the past, our regulations have specifically exempted flavoring agents, and there were other things that were exempt from compounding. Specifically on the education that was provided by the USP committee, they addressed the flavoring agents twice, and the intention by the USP committee was that flavoring is now compounding. So we can't change and keep that standard that is no longer compounding when the USP committee, those experts you referred to, have determined it is now compounding.
Okay, so that's not what's being, so in B and C, that's not flavoring they're talking about?
Not
okay.
at all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other member comments on this section? Okay, moving on to section 1735.1, introduction and scope and compounding definitions. This section provides the definitions that will be used to apply consistent understanding both in the application of the USP chapter as well as board regulations. Probably the most notable change resulting from the committee's meeting was the inclusion of the definition of potency, which was not part of the original proposal. As the draft minutes indicate, the committee again received significant comment and ultimately received a consensus. Are there any comments from the board members on this section, 1735.1?
So once again, everything that's in here was not in USP 795. And this is us clarifying or adding definitions that we felt were necessary.
I think to start the answer, because Chief Inspector Acosta may want to add on to it, my understanding of what was discussed at the committee is that the information that's being included in this regulation, particularly in this section, is either not in USP or not specific enough in USP to meet even what our current regulations state. So in many situations, these are in our current regulations, but not specifically written this way in USP. So for clarity, we put them in the new section. And if we wanted to...
For clarity, we didn't, we attempted to not repeat anything that was in the chapter in our regulation. So to go with what Ms. Shipka said, that the clarity that you'll find in our regs is where we found that there was a lack. So for example, 1735.1A, we defined approved labeling. The chapter just uses it. You're just supposed to know what it means. But it's not innate for everybody to necessarily know what it means. So we provided a definition to help the licensed public. Thank you.
Any further board member comment on this section? Moving on to section 1735.2, personnel training and evaluation. This section details the training and evaluation requirements as draft minutes indicate. After considering public comment, the committee reached a consensus. As a part of the discussion, additional FAQs were identified relating to training requirements. The FAQ is necessary to draw the distinction between USP requirements and those established in this regulation. Are there any comments from the board on this section regarding personnel training and evaluation? No. I just want to make sure I'm not giving everyone adequate time. Moving on to section 1735.3, personnel hygiene and garbing. As the title suggests, this section discusses personal hygiene and garbing requirements. There was a significant discussion regarding the conditions under which someone should be prevented from entering the compounding area. After much discussion, the language was amended to allow professional judgment as reflected in the proposed language. The committee also received comment regarding the types of jewelry that must be removed. Staff advised all that the regulation language allows for a gowning and garbing I'll say that again because it's important. Staff advised all at the meeting that the regulation language allows for gowning and garbing accommodations in 1735.3G. A detailed information is included in the draft minutes. Are there any comments on the board on this section regarding personal hygiene and garbing? Section 1735.4, building and facilities. The committee's discussion on this section primarily focused around a provision, the draft regulation, to provide flexibility when compounding area could serve in more than one purpose, if compounding was not performed daily. Ultimately, after consideration and the concerns from the public, the provision was removed. I note that the CPHA letter requests the removal of 1735.4C requirement. This issue was not discussed during the committee meeting. I do not believe that this change is necessary, but the proposed regulations, just to clarify, the reason I don't believe this is necessary is because the proposed regulations do not address cleaning a product where a dishwasher would be acceptable. This section rather only speaks to the rinsing of equipment, which is an activity that typically occurs following the cleaning. Rinsing removes the residue of tap water, for example. So this section does not change any of the expectations of cleaning or the use of dishwashers. Are there any comments from the board on this section? Section 1735.5, cleaning and sanitizing. The primary change to this section followed discussion that the board's emphasis should be on the documentation of cleaning. This was in response to public comment. The committee responded that cleaning documentation is important and therefore should be highlighted. I note that the CPHA letter indicates that USP 795 is quote-unquote pretty clear on cleaning frequency and how it needs to occur. As I stated earlier, board regulation may at times need to exceed USP to ensure safe practices and processes for patient protection. This was fully discussed and addressed during the meeting. Are there any comments from the board on this section? Section 1735.6, Equipment and Components. The committee received significant comments on this section of the regulation. In its original form, the proposed regulations required the use of a closed system processing device, also known as a CVE, or containment ventilated enclosure, for any weighing, measuring, or other manipulations of components in a powder form. The committee noted that the requirement did exceed USP requirements, which just requires an assessment, I'll say that a couple of times during this, to determine when such a device should be used, unless it involves a hazardous drug, and that would be covered under USP 800. Members of the committee ultimately reached a consensus that such a requirement is not necessary at this time, and that the requirement was removed. As chair of the committee, I have requested that staff arrange an informational training session on the use of CVEs and how risk assessment should be performed if such information is available. I note that the CPHA letter requests changes to 1735.6C, some of which were discussed during the meeting and no changes were made at that time. However, the letter appropriately indicates that a component is not dispensed. As such, the word dispensed will be removed from the proposed language. In addition, 1735.6E was removed during the meeting. I have one more thing before we go. Wait. Okay, just one more thing. Because I need to clarify, I had another statement I'm supposed to put in here that clarifies what the intent is. So the word dispensed will be removed from the proposed language. It is my intention to address this possible amendment to the proposal after we complete our discussion today on the remainder of the proposal. The recommendation will be to remove the word dispense from the item in 1735.6. And so that the final wording will read, any component used to compound a CNSP shall be used and stored in accordance with the following, and continues on from there. So I know that could be a little bit of confusion, so any board member comments? Did I answer your question?
I thought you would, so you were talking about 1735.6B. Okay. Did you mention E yet?
I did.
So I thought you said E was going to be removed, but it's still in here, but
it was renumbered. So the old E.
Old E is gone.
Is that am I stating that correctly? So everything got moved up by letters? The old E was
Except
removed.
then there's no D.
So are you saying that the letters are out of? So we have a non-substantive change if the numbers are not correct for the outlining.
Okay.
And I'm sure the staff can take care of that.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the comments. Any further comments from board members on this section regarding equipment and components? As a reminder to the public, I encourage you to come with us and learn more about CVEs, because we will be bringing this up again in the future to learn more about containment ventilated enclosures. Section 1735.7, Master Formulation and Compounding Records. I have to learn how to say those correctly because in the old world we said them differently. It's called Master Formulation and Compounding Records. This section transitions away from master formula and compounding logs. See the difference there? That used to conform to the terms in previous versions of USP. The current terms in the USP to be implemented, 795 to be implemented in December, state master formulation and compounding records. As indicated in the draft minutes, the committee received significant comment regarding the proposed requirement for master formulation document to include as a part of it the container closure system, including the volume of such system. While this was not changed during the committee meeting as a part of our consensus building, staff conducted additional research based on the comments of this issue and will be suggesting a modification of the requirement as detailed in the chair report. So again, that's another area that's a little bit of confusion. So are there any comments from the board on this section to provide more clarity? Okay. It's become the Maria show. Section 1735.8, release inspections. Members, this is one of the few sections that there were no public comments received during the committee meeting. Do you have any comments? Section 1735.9, labeling. I believe that there may be some confusion between the term label and labeling. USP 795 provides definitions for both in the glossary. I strongly encourage everyone to read and understand the differences of these two terms if you have not done so already. Public comment on this section was limited, but a suggestion was made that we update the general prescription label requirement to include the route of administration. This is listed elsewhere in pharmacy regulations. The committee noted that such a change went beyond the scope of our committee's work, but I'm sharing the comment just in case the board is interested in another committee evaluating if such a change is appropriate. Do we have any comments from the board on this section?
Maybe I'm confused because 1735.9A1 says route of intended administration.
That is correct. So the comment was that that change should not occur in 1735, but should occur in other regulatory language, which talks about what should be on the label. In that section, it does not have the route. And the board's discussion was such that that was an excellent point, but it was not the purview of the board to address regulation in other sections. So it remains in 1735.9, but we could entertain, again, information if the board's pleasure is if that section of regulations should be looked at and amended, in a different process.
So it would apply to all prescriptions?
Right, not just this one.
She's not. Okay. No, you can say so. Any other member comment?
1735.9 on labeling, subsection B3, the name, address, and phone numbers of the compounding facilities if the CNCSP is to be sent outside of the or healthcare system which was compounded. I thought we were staying away from the addresses for for the safety of the facilities. Isn't that?
So the prior action earlier in this meeting was for individual licenses. This is the facility address, which is public information. Yeah.
Be public, we're fine.
Thank you for the question. Any other public comment? Section 1735.10, establishing beyond use dates. Public comment was limited in this section as well. It was noted that it may be beneficial to develop an FAQ on this section for clarity. Are there any comments from the board on this section? 1735.11, standard operating procedures. Public comment on this section was limited to a question of the need for the provision. The commenter was advised that the provision is current law, so it was not new, it was just a continuation of current law. Are there any comments from board members on this section? 1735.12, quality assurance and quality control. There were no committee or public comments on this section. Are there any member comments? 1735.13, packaging and transporting. This section this discussion around this section primarily surrounded the delivery of a drug and how a pharmacy can be held responsible if a delivery courier, a delivery company like a mail carrier, mishandles the drug as a part of the delivery process. The general discussion did not result in any change of the language, but better understanding of the board's expectation. So just to clarify on that, it was that the pharmacy is responsible for setting up processes for the delivery, but they would not be held accountable for any errors or problems with the mail carrier itself. I note that the CPHA letter requests a cross-reference to USP Chapter 659. I had to look that one up, 659. This would be inappropriate as that chapter relates to packaging and storage requirements within a pharmacy and not to the transportation or delivery of a drug. Are there any comments from the board on this section? Almost there. 1735.14, complaint handling and adverse event reporting. There were no public comments or committee comments on this section. Do we have any board member comments? 1735.15, documentation. The committee considered comments from the public regarding the value of documenting the time an edit occurs in the pharmacy record. The committee was advised that not all software systems provide the same, and records can be easily deleted or altered without an audit trail, necessitating the need for an uneditable format of records. Any board member comment on this section? Okay, time for transition. As we complete our review of the regulation proposal, our committee offered the enclosed recommendation for the board's consideration. Before I make the motion from the committee, I would like the board's consideration of some additional changes to the proposed language as detailed in the chair report. These changes are being offered by staff based on further reflection of the comments reviewed during the committee meetings and are listed in the chair's report under page 3, recent update heading. I have reviewed the recommended changes and would suggest that we include them as a part of the motion. Committee members, do you agree? Okay. In addition, President Lipke. Okay. In addition, I would like to include the proposed amendment to 1735.6 as suggested in the CPHA letter to remove the word dispensed. Committee members, do you agree? Okay. With that, I think we're ready for the next drum roll. The committee recommends to the board to modify Article 4.5 and to authorize board staff to initiate the formal rulemaking process with regard to the changes proposed, and authorize the executive officer to make changes to the language consistent with policies indicated by the board. That is my motion. That is, yeah, I guess we need a second because it didn't come correctly from the committee.
You got committee consensus.
Okay, so we don't need a second. Any board member comments on the motion in its entirety? Okay, now we move on to the opportunity for public comment. Come on up. Commenters, we would like to advise you that comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. We respectfully request that comments focus on items not previously considered during the July 11th committee meeting.
Before my time starts, can I ask one more process question before I get to my commentary?
Sure.
One of our members had planned on being here and unfortunately due to a family emergency could not be here. At the conclusion of my 3 minutes, would the board indulge me in reading some of what she was going to say?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it, Alan. Thank you. Okay. I'm going to go, you obviously all have our letter, so I'm going to skip to different parts where I feel that there may have been comment, and I'm trying to address parts that I don't think were in the comments during the committee. 1735.1B, We talked about the issue of the term clinically in 503A regulations. I want to read the verbatim definition of 503A, which states, the term essentially a copy of a commercially available drug product does not include a drug product in which there was a change made for an identified individual patient, which produces for that patient a significant difference as determined by the prescribing practitioner between the compounded drug and the comparable commercially available drug. The reason we had asked for removing the word clinically is that that does not appear in 503A regulations, and we'd ask for that to be removed. Jumping to 1735.1E.
Did you want discussion for every point, or?
Well, that's up to
For
you,
your-
as long as
okay.
it doesn't
So we'll
count
keep
against
track.
my time.
Okay.
Okay. I was getting ready to speed read.
I
so-
know, you've got a speed run. We're not counting your time right now, but what's the pleasure of the board? Should we take them one at a time, or after the 3 minutes, address them in order?
I think one at a time.
So we'll stop the clock.
Thank you.
So clinically, can you remind me again what section of your letter that's referring
That's
to?
1735.1B.
1B. I didn't get that far yet. Okay. I know there might be a little bit more discussion, but I wanted to just remind you and the members of the board and members of the public that we had this discussion at the committee meeting, and there was discussion that true, this is not, that word is not used specifically in USP, but we felt it was necessary for regulations within the state of California. Any other? So you are correct, but that was specifically added for California.
The only reason I mentioned it is because during the necessity portion of the meeting material stated that this came from 503A regulations, and I wanted to point out that that's not entirely true.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, the next one, 1735.1E. This definition for repackaging is a carbon copy of what it says in 797, except for the difference of the word sterile. What I want to point out to this board is that USP 797 rightly defined repackaging because sterile products need to maintain their sterility from one package to another. That is not necessary for non-sterile compounded preparations. So with that, I'll ask for any comments on that.
Can you clarify your 1735.1E?
Yeah, so it's listed as G in my letter. That's one of the errors that I made.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Let me give you a second to go back and read your letter now.
So, so just to
Yes.
stop the clock, good. To comment, we did have this discussion also at the committee meeting, and one of the things we talked about was that you are correct, that this was in addition to USP taking out the word sterile, but there are still impacts to the quote-unquote repackaging of a non-sterile product into a different
Container.
delivery device or different product. And so the discussion was more about that your comments are valid and accurate, but there still is a concern and a need to discuss and regulate the repackaging of non-sterile products to different types of packaging or different sizes of packaging. And maybe Chief Inspector Acosta might have additional comments.
No, I think you represented what we discussed almost at length in the committee meeting, is that we did take exactly the definition from 797 and apply it to non-sterile products. We did it specifically. We did it on purpose.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to combine the next two, 1735.3A and B. We had discussion about garbing. One thing that I don't believe was mentioned, and this is why I'm making a comment now, it relates to point number 2 in our letter under the reasonings. This regulation has a significant likelihood of creating human resources problems if a designated person is now basically tasked with performing a human body inspection every time they're going to go perform non-sterile compounding. We received very worried comments from a lot of our members about this, given the recent times that we live in, and we respectfully ask that you remove this proposed regulation, both of these.
I'm going to go back and read what was stated in the overview comments, because we did make accommodation. So I'm just going to, I'm not going to wordsmith it again. I'm just going to read it specifically what it says. After much discussion, the language was amended to allow for professional judgment in reflection of the proposed language. This was in result to the comments that the original proposed language was too restrictive. We said thou shalt not, essentially, and we took out the term, the what we thought was onerous, and saying, and the resource issues that would be with thou shalt not. If you have this laundry list of things, you will not be in the compounding area, and referred that back to professional judgment of the PIC or the designated individual, trying to give more authority to the site rather than being the Board of Pharmacy dictating to the sites. So that was the intent.
Okay. Next one, I'm going to jump to 1735.10B3. I would make a note, as mentioned in our letter, that obviously this proposed regulation goes above and beyond what USP intended and removes, in our opinion, professional judgment for what USP allows for and encourages. Further, there's an existing regulation in the compounding regulations that currently allows for professional judgment for an extension of a BUD using stability documentation and, among other things, the container of what it's packaged. Why has that changed and why do we need this? So we're respectfully asking for this regulation to be removed.
So as I try to get my thoughts together, Inspector Acosta, if you wanted to chime in first.
B3.
10B3, which is about compatibility of the container closure system will be
So, Maria,
defined.
we discussed this at
We
length
did.
at the committee as well,
Mhm.
in that in 10.5, it specifically suggests you look at those things, but it does not require them to be something that limits the assignment of the BUD. And the committee, after that conversation, agreed that it should be something that should actually be used or required to limit the BUD. They're written very differently in the two.
I guess the point that I was trying to make is that the way it's written, it doesn't allow for that. And so
So
that's,
that was not, I don't think, the full intent, and if upon further review, if you feel that that's still
Yes.
an issue, then we do have a full hearing scheduled for all of this.
Yes.
We can get into the minutia of that, but that's not how we read it at this time.
okay. Given I've heard my time was up, I'd like to read some comments that were made by one of our members that was watching and would like to read some of her comments. Can
you just clarify, they're unable to come so they're watching, or they're watching so they didn't come?
I'm sorry, they wanted to attend.
Okay,
They
thank
could
you.
not make it. I apologize.
Thank you.
So I'm assuming that read one comment kind of thing? Same applies?
So I think that
I only
you're
have
probably
three.
just reading something into the record because the person's not here to be responding to the committee's questions.
Okay.
Thank
All right. 1735G, question is, should disposal only be included in consultation for compounded medications? What about opioids, insulin, commercially available hormones? I recommend we remove this section from the proposed recommendation and revise CCR 1707.2 to include disposal.
Can you read the citation again, where you're
1735G.
1735G? Thank you.
This is, by the way, this is not in our letter for
No,
clarification.
I'm just
Yeah.
noting
Yeah,
it.
but I believe that this comment was provided, it was discussed during, I'm sorry. is it
We're
a
not
minute?
responding. Because if we do, we have to respond to all.
Yes. 1735.6D, which has been renumbered to C. Any API or added substance used to compound a CNSP shall be obtained from an FDA-registered supplier and shall be accompanied by a valid COA. In the meeting on the July 11th, as per the minutes provided by the board, Dr. Acosta indicated that an API used by USP definition is a bulk substance. However, this is not true. An API, by definition in USP 795, is, quote, any substance or mixture of substances intended to be used in the compounding of a preparation, thereby becoming an active ingredient in that preparation and furnishing pharmacological activity. My comments from the meeting on July 11th are still valid. Some APIs, for example, crushed tablets, open capsules, do not have a valid COA. I strongly recommend the board keep the language in existing law 1735.3C. Certificates of purity or analysis are not required for drug products that are approved by the FDA. And then finally, for 1735.11A3, the committee chair report further revised the proposal and now has the phrase, C, include the provisions used by a pharmacist to make the determination and approval by a pharmacist of the ingredients and the compounding process for each preparation before the compounding begins. The question is, what is a provision as used in this context? How would I document this? Appreciate the time the board has given me.
Mr. Martinez,
Yes.
would you be able to provide the document that you wrote, that you read to the staff, so we have the
Yes,
entirety?
I will send it after the meeting.
Thank you. Hi.
My name is Chad Baker. I'm with FlavorX, and this is Ned Blankovich, who is our counsel. I'm an executive at the company. We supply flavoring systems to about 45,000 pharmacies across the world to basically help kids take their medication. And I know this issue has been brought up before Ned gets to his talking points. I just want to frame this properly in everyone's mind. This is about helping kids take their medicine. It's no secret that children struggle to take medicine, and the reason for that typically comes down to the taste. And we have experience where flavoring has been considered compounding, and I can tell you if that is the case, it stops entirely. The doctors don't prescribe for it. The pharmacists don't want to jump through their hoops. So that is the context that we're coming here today with, and we have facts if you want those. I know they weren't available at the compounding meeting, but we'd love to present those to you so you can see why it would be beneficial to keep the current language in place, which I know is tough based on what USP has said. But I think with that, I'll leave it up to Ned, and then if you have any questions, we're here.
Excuse me, who do you represent again?
Good afternoon. Ned Milankovich. I'm a pharmacist attorney from the law firm of Much-Shellis, representing FlavorX.
The name of the company here, the Flavor.
FlavorX.
The company's called FlavorRx.
Flavor RX, okay.
Yeah, so we have our flavoring systems in 45,000 pharmacies. We've been in business for 24 years, and roughly 150 million medications have been custom flavored with our program. So it's proven, it's safe, it's tested.
So thank you. Thank you very much. We've traveled far and long today. I've come from Chicago, Illinois. Chad obviously came from Baltimore, Maryland, where their company is. Thank you for taking the time. I want to, first of all, thank the board for all the hard work they've done with USP 795. I'm a pharmacist attorney. I sat on the Illinois State Board of Pharmacy for a decade. Obviously, I'm here today as an attorney. We have deep concerns regarding the proposed rule. We feel that it will adversely affect and impact pharmacists' usage of flavorings. USP's revised definition of non-sterile compounding is much broader, in our opinion, and less precise than the previous iteration. This redefinition will result in pharmacies that were previously not considered to be engaged in compounding when dispensing flavorings, potentially many dispensing and community pharmacies suddenly finding themselves subject to the rigorous standards of USP 795. Medication adherence, or the degree to which the patient's behavior corresponds with the agreed recommendations from a healthcare provider, is critically important in patient care, and it's an essential determinant of clinical success. FlavorRx supplies 37,000 pharmacies, 3,000 of those pharmacies in the state of California, with sugar-free, non-allergenic, and inert medicine flavorings and flavoring systems with the goal of improving medication palatability to drive medication adherence. Over 150 million medications have been custom flavored with FlavorRx, most commonly antibiotics and antivirals. Flavorings have been a safe and proven part of good pharmacy practice for over 24 years with no incidences of drug compromise with these products. Remember, children differ from adults in many aspects of pharmacotherapy, including taste preferences. Children are able to choose a preferred flavor for their liquid medicine if they have a choice. Parents also will opt for that. Getting children to follow a treatment regimen is a problem that's widespread. It's frustrating for physicians and for parents alike. Palatability of pediatric oral medications is one of the most crucial factors influencing adherence to therapeutic regimens and therapeutic outcomes. We believe that the revised USP 795 defines compounding as the process of combining, admixing, diluting, pooling, reconstituting other than as provided in the manufacturer's labeling or otherwise altering of a drug or bulk drug substance. But USP 795 does not explicitly include flavorings in the definition of non-sterile compounding, nor is flavoring specifically addressed anywhere else in the chapter. There has been an expert committee, of course, we know that, and they responded to comments on flavorings. It was very vague. The commenter's recommendations included in Chapter 795 a statement that the addition of flavorings should not be considered compounding. The USP expert committee currently chooses not to incorporate the recommendations because they think that the addition of flavoring may affect the chemical and physical stability of a CNSP. So the revised definition of non-sterile compounding in Chapter 795 is likely to have a broader application than the drafters intended. The USP intended to include flavoring that affects the chemical and physical stability of a non-sterile preparation. However, the language could be interpreted to exclude some flavorings from the definition of non-sterile compounding, but not all.
Just to let you know, the timer went off about 15, 20 seconds ago, but go ahead and finish up.
Apologize.
I didn't think maybe they didn't hear it.
I didn't hear it.
Okay. But go ahead and wind up.
I'll finish by saying that numerous states have implemented rules carving out flavoring agents. For instance, Iowa, the Iowa Administrative Code incorporates USP 795, but it explicitly includes flavoring in the definition of compounding, but it opts to carve out those flavoring agents from the definition that are therapeutically inert, non-allergenic substances consisting of inactive ingredients that are added in a small quantity, less than 5% of the volume of the drug. Arizona, Colorado, Connecticut, Illinois, Missouri, Nebraska, New Hampshire, New Jersey, all of them have recognized the importance of accessibility to palatable medications. And I think that it would be helpful to us if patients in California would also have the ability to have flavored medications. And for these reasons, I'm cutting this short because I'm concerned about the time, but we are respectfully requesting that the California Board of Pharmacy take a second look at the proposed rule and reinsert 1735B regarding the exclusion of flavoring agents from compounding, or at a minimum, seek to carve out an exception for those flavorings that are therapeutically inert, non-allergenic flavoring agents from the definition of non-sterile compounding in the same way that many other states already do. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. And just to, I guess, alliterate, is my background is from a acute care, large pediatric setting. So I certainly feel and understand a lot of your comments. And understand that your comments also state that you disagree with what USP is providing direction for us to do. So I appreciate your comments.
And if I could just add something to that, we are in discussions with USP to get them to see what we've got, because when you do look at their comments, they mention the specific flavors, and we cover that. So we're talking with them.
Well, it'd be good to watch how that emerges. Thank you.
But so I do have one question of them. So your solution is in 1735E?
B.
1735B, where it says repackaging of compound non-sterile products shall be considered compounding?
C, actually. I'm sorry, I said B.
Reconstitution in accordance
Reconstitution.
with directions which are not FDA approved?
Well, I suppose that's one way of addressing it. The other way, I was looking at the existing version, I should say, where it specifically carves out.
So, Ms. Veal, just to clarify, is they're referring to current regulation that contains a provision under that number accepting out flavoring. That's not in the current proposal.
That's right.
Yeah, no, I know it's not in the current proposal because I asked Inspector Costa about it already in a couple, I don't know, was it 45 minutes ago? But But I'm just, yeah, I just kind of wanted to clarify, because being a retail pharmacist, I know that it's important, hence the way you kind of get some medication down kids. And that's why I asked it originally, because it just seems very odd to me that flavoring has been removed.
It is an excellent point, because we do see the clinical need for patient tolerance of medications. And unfortunately, USP did not see that and considers it under compounding.
And just to give you a preview of what we're going to say to them, and something I would hope you consider, states that had this on the books where flavoring was compounding, it wasn't done. Kids were not offered that service by pharmacists. The doctors weren't recommending it because they didn't think it was their job, so it was just in this gray area.
You previously testified to that, so thank you.
Sorry.
But so I guess my question is, as we're going through 795 and we're trying to clarify and make it better for the consumers in California, it seems like we're doing a lot of things that aren't in 795. So I don't understand why we wouldn't consider this, because it's not explicitly called out that they can't have it.
Well, it is. It's not saying that you can't. It just says that it's defined as compounding. So what USP is directing us is to say, if you do that, that's compounding and follows the needs for compounding. So this would be different in that if the board were to put something in, addressing it in that other manner, then we're saying that we want to be lesser than USP, not more than USP, because USP is saying it is compounding.
Well, no, I kind of disagree with that, because I think we're trying to make USP better. And I think that this is making USP better.
So I think that's probably illegal, or maybe Christine can speak to that. Does the board, what is the board's stance on not implementing full USP standards and doing something that they have suggested that we do, we say we don't want to do?
So
That's a little different.
Currently in our proposed reg, we don't address it at all. The term flavoring is not in 95 at all. It's in our regs as they stand right now from 2017. So kind of my thinking is we need to see where USP is actually going to land, and luckily the process of writing these regs will be a decent amount of time to maybe see where USP actually lands. But where it stands right now, the way that the law is drafted in front of you, it doesn't explicitly say anything about flavoring. That would be an interpretation that the USP committee has given us that we would need to apply as the minimum practice standard. To take a minimum practice standard and say, we're going to go less than that by not making it compounding,
and I guess
that's the issue.
I guess less than is, I'm not comfortable with that, because we have, in addition to the requirements of USP 795 and reference chapters, so I guess I'm saying in addition we will allow, because once again, I'm a retail pharmacist. I mean, I know that this has been a tool to help get, it's kids, but it's also sometimes adults to get to take their medication. And I just, I feel if you take it away from the retail pharmacist, because I think making it 795, I think might, and maybe stakeholders can talk, because I might be totally wrong, but I think we're going down the route where a normal retail pharmacist like me won't be able to do it.
Correct, but the way that it's drafted currently in our proposed 35, it doesn't directly say it can't be done or has to be done under compounding. That's an interpretation that USP has provided to us. So what my concern is that I feel that it's something that would change dramatically, and as a mother of two small children, I completely think that it's kind of scary what's happening. But as sitting in my position, my concern is that if we decide to deviate from the minimum standard set by USP, those experts, right, then where are we going to draw the line that we have an expertise that perhaps they didn't? I think we need to take a little bit of time and let him go to the USP and let USP assess the data that he's going to provide to them and let USP come back and tell us, because there's nothing, I just was on USP's site, there's nothing even in their FAQs about this yet. So we don't have any solid foundation to say whether it is or isn't truly going to be an enforceable standard to be compounding or not. That's just what was given to us in education from USP.
If I may add, USP has been vague on the subject, as Ms. Acosta says, that they have not put it in 795. There's nothing in 795 about flavorings, and what we're asking for the board to do is clarify that it is permitted. And I understand the concerns that 790 USP has with respect to a substance that's being added to a drug that would adversely impact the physical or chemical attributes of the active ingredient. But where a product is inert, it's non-allergenic, and we have proven studies from the University of Maryland that demonstrate that there's absolutely no adverse impact on the potency or the stability of an active ingredient used in the treatment of a child. Then why wouldn't it be allowed? And if California has this currently in its rule, what changed that it says now that flavorings are compounds? And practically speaking, it will impact the ability of a pharmacist to dispense flavorings because there's all kinds of rigors in 795 once you're in that compounding definition. And I would even venture to say that you will not be allowed to dispense a flavor. You will not be able to exercise your independent judgment as a pharmacist.
I think you're starting to go beyond the board members' comments. So I will allow you to respond to the board members' comments, but we'll probably have to keep you limited to what the question was. Ms. Veal, did you have any other comments, or other board members have comments?
Well, I'll just finish up, I guess, what I'm thinking, and that is I feel like we are in this situation, and I think, I brought it up at the very beginning, I really feel like we are not serving the public by not addressing this. And perhaps, Christine, you're correct that, and I guess, so if maybe by the time we wait, it will be resolved, I mean, what do we think our timeline is here?
Well,
do we
I
really think that that's going to be resolved?
one of the
If it's
opportun-
not, then I think we got to take it head on right now, and we got to do what's right for the, we can't, I mean, and I said in the very beginning, I really respect USP and I think everything they do. Well, if it's silent and it's yet something that we need to do that's right, we need to do what's right.
Agreed.
So, any other board member comments on this issue?
I think everybody does want to be held by bureaucratic regulatory handcuffs. How's that? And I think we all understand the issue here. It seems like the moment we have a buy, we can get away without enforcement of this. And even if we do have to enforce it, we have to mitigate that. And so I think we're all of the same mind.
I guess it's more how do you accomplish it? Because the choices are, because we're silent, that we would just apply what USP states, and USP states very little. So the risk is, should we continue to stay silent, or should we be explicit and call it out at risk of USP not having the same expectation in the next few months? So those are the choices, I guess, before the board. I think we all agree the issue is important. It's not that, it's more of how do we move forward in a appropriate manner. Is it to the board to be specific, at risk of being different than USP, or just to stay silent and follow USP's lead?
I don't know if the board wants to have lesser standards, minimum standards than USP 795.
This is not lesser standards.
It is.
Okay, so does it say, I thought I just heard in 795, it does not address flavoring.
It doesn't, and neither do our regulations, but the concern
No,
is
our
if
regulation
the
says.
No, that's current, we're talking proposed.
Oh, okay.
If the USP, those experts come out and say, we believe it is compounding, and then the California board says, it's not, I believe that is a lesser standard.
So I would agree with you. If they come out and they say it is compounding and it's part of 795, then I would agree. But I heard that it's silent.
They have done that in public education. They haven't done it in writing yet.
Which is very interesting that they would start educating on something that they haven't reduced to a writing in their own chapter. It's frankly absurd.
Why don't we write a memo or request USP for clarification and get something back in writing?
I
and
like
go
that
from
idea.
there, because I think we're spending a
lot
lot
of
of
time
time
on
on
this.
proposed on what they may or may not be
And
doing.
then
and we
depending
can
on the
work with
response to that
yeah.
letter, we could deal with it during the regulatory hearings
Yeah.
and make it more perfect.
Yeah, we agree on
That
that.
work?
Yeah, I
Makes
think
sense. Let's
I
do
think
that.
that's a good
I agree
idea.
with that,
Yeah.
too.
Well, just as an aside here, and this is still the same issue. We say, 790 USP they are the experts. Well, on this, I think the experts are incorrect if they go down that road. And I think as a board, and I'm not sure how to go about it, we should say, no, you are wrong. And I think the public is better served by not going with the experts. So
Are you saying in the letter that we should be more than
No.
just asking a question, but stating an opinion also?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just, you want me to?
Maybe we should.
With all
No,
due
but
respect,
I agree with you. I agree with you, Alan. I mean, wow, I know, shock of the year.
with all due respect, this is the rulemaking body, not USP, and I don't think California has ever been shy to write a rule. So I
that's
think
fun.
I think it's fully
I'm
within-
sorry, I'm sorry,
fully within your
you're out of order, I'm sorry. Really. You're an attorney, and I'm not a judge, but.
Okay.
But going back to Alan, because we want to be productive and move forward, and I think we all have an intent, so I just want to have you articulate what you think staff should do, and maybe some overarching comments of what should be in the letter. I heard that we wanted to ask an opinion of USP, but I also heard that potentially you wanted to state an opinion helped push them in a certain direction. I'm not probably saying that
Right.
correctly, but Dr.
Correct.
Shad, what would you like to do?
I only want to approach it incrementally.
Okay.
So you just
So-
want to ask the question, or you want
No, I want to just ask
Ask the
the question.
to? Okay.
So since we're in public comment,
Do we need a
what's the
motion
production?
related to
That's something we
I
can
think that's
direct staff?
direction to staff.
Okay,
Yeah.
that? Okay.
thank you.
And
you.
so so it's a direction to staff, and let's say USP comes back and says, you're right, for the inert flavoring products, that's not compounding. So how does that impact our proposed rule?
So I'm not sure that it does, to be perfectly honest, because we're kind of deferring to USPs, but we could do an FAQ, but we'll also look at the language once we get a response back. The beautiful thing is the committee's continuing to meet. So we can always bring it back to the committee and then back to the full board.
But is the committee done meeting now on 795 and you're moving on to 797?
There is the potential that this could come back to the committee, or it could be dealt with during the regulatory hearing process also.
Okay.
So we still
I
have
just wanna make
opportunity.
sure it's not
I
dead,
can't
because-
promise that
It's
it will go
not
back to
dead.
the committee, but it will not disappear. It will either go back to the committee or be brought up during the
And
hearing
I will
process.
say the same thing. I won't disappear either.
Oh, good. Good.
I don't think,
And
right?
so-
You're not going to take me off, right, Greg?
So thank you for your comments. You have made a
No.
difference to the board.
Thank
So
you very-
traveling was worth it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi, again. So, as an independent pharmacist, an owner of one little shop in the lower left-hand corner of this country, trying to keep his doors open, and not privy to the last meeting, so without being redundant and having you to go through it and through it and through it, 1735D as in David, my question is, if I'm reading this correctly, and I certainly don't understand the last 6 words of this proposal, will be compounded the identified patient. Something's missing there. But my understanding of this is a physician writes a prescription for a patient, comes in with it, obviously not commercially available, perhaps the doctor's own regimen of whatever it is, right? Fisher cream, breast cream, whatever they come up with. According to this reg, am I to call them again to double check that they want it compounded? Is that what this is saying? Obviously, I'm not going to make it for you before you come in. That's a given. But once I get the prescription, is that not the doctor's approval? This is what I want. I don't need to call and say, doctor, are you sure that's what you want? I don't understand what it's saying.
And I appreciate your comments because it's an excellent question. It was brought up several times during the committee meeting because everyone had the same concern, both the committee members and members of the public. It was identified as that this should be included in the FAQs to be extremely clear, so it's not up for interpretation or what the intent was. And rather than me explain my recollection, I think it's probably better for Chief Inspector Acosta to kind of go through it again, because like I could tell you, it is very complicated and we want to be clear. So we're going to put this kind of wording in the FAQ, but I think one of the things I can tell you is by the end of the committee meeting, then we discussed this section, members of the public that had the most concerns were starting to feel a little bit better that it was not going to be interpreted in the worst case scenario. So with that said.
So during the committee meeting, we discussed at length this particular section is actually in current law. So my question, Mr. Green, would be, what do you currently do? Because it's currently and has actually been in law since I think 2007, that there is a requirement to have a valid prescription in which there is acknowledgement that is a compounded product. We actually added a sentence to make it a little bit easier. If that doctor always writes that product for that particular patient and it's always compounded, you're allowed to have just one piece of paper that acknowledges that, except it brought it back up to everybody's attention and they're more concerned with it. Your practice you're currently doing is probably already compliant with this because you're a compounding pharmacy and most of your doctors only send you stuff when it's a compounded product.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much, you know that.
So it won't change.
Well, I mean, I guess the thing is without, adding extra caveats is we've all been there where you're waiting 3 days for a refill, okay. I'm waiting for a prescription validation that you did want an all-purpose nipple cream to your specifications? No.
I don't, the intention of it, like we discussed.
I mean, that's how it reads to me, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but that's actual verbiage from current law.
Okay.
And it's not meant for those products that we know are not commercially available. It's for the people that like to dabble in the commercially available products because they can have a better price margin. Of course. It's really meant for that. But your practice as it is today will not change based on how that's written.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I would encourage you to work with us as we develop FAQs for this because we certainly do not want to discourage or to create impediments to the practice.
Thank you.
So I just want to make sure I understand. So I'm coming in with a prescription for something that that is commercially made, but my pharmacy says, oh, here, let me compound it for you. And so my pharmacy would have to call the doctor and say, we just want to make sure you know we're compounding it.
You can't do that.
Right,
No.
okay.
There's
So
that's where
this is something that's not commercially made, and so it has to be compounded. So I'm calling the doctor to say, by the way, do you know that this has to be compounded? Is that what my call's
That was
about?
my understanding that you're saying no.
Not to that extent.
So if it is clear by the documentation provided in writing already by the physician, then you're already compliant. If you read
So the
that first
physician
sentence.
knows. If I think the physician might not know, then it's my responsibility to call the physician?
It's your responsibility to confirm with the physician that they know that this is a compounded product, not a manufactured product. And this really comes into play when sometimes we get patients dispense things and they think that they're a manufactured product, and lo and behold, they realize it was a compounded product. To make sure the physician on the prescribing end also understands that we can assume our compounders are providing that proper consultation and labeling that tells the patient that. Sometimes our providers do not realize that.
So we discussed during the committee meeting that this may be different, but maybe an opportunity in the FAQs to actually have like common scenarios.
Yeah.
To help explain it, because it's easy to misinterpret or to either imply stricter or lesser standards, and by having a couple of scenarios might be helpful.
Got a slew of them.
You go, oh, good, write them down.
But you're a compounding pharmacy, so the doctor probably sending someone to you because they know you're compounding. I'm thinking if it's going to another not a known compounding pharmacy, that I guess I'm just thinking if I'm the guy working behind the counter, I mean, how do I know the doctor doesn't know that this isn't compounded? I mean, I don't want us to
You should be a relationship with your provider. Like, there should be a conversation with the pharmacist and the provider if you don't know. If you don't know each other, because the question is, well, then how would he know specific formulations you may or may not be able to compound, right? So he can't go to Mr. Green's pharmacy, prescribe the exact same thing and expect to get it from Mr. Grisella's pharmacy. I mean, that's the whole point of compounding is everybody has an individualized patient drug. So there should be a communication between the pharmacy, the pharmacist, and the prescriber.
Do you think that's the case, that the doctor usually knows?
I think there was a little bit of, I think that's a little bit ambiguous, because if there is a particular something with a particular penetrating agent for a need, let's say an arthritis cream, just off the bat, he should be making it fairly similar to me as the guy up in San Francisco, fairly similar as far as its effectiveness. Would you not agree? They should be.
But when you get that prescription for the first time from that new provider, are you going to reach out and say, oh, I just wanted to make sure you understand my formulation? That first interaction with you have a new provider asking for a compounded product. Most of you guys are reaching out, in my experience,
Right,
and having
unless
a
he writes
conversation.
exactly how he wants it made with ingredients. which
And then
is
you're
fine.
probably going, woo-hoo, I have a
I mean,
new provider.
No, yeah, but I think doctors today are a lot more savvy, particularly the ones that we deal with. They know I want it in this particular form and ratio. And I'm just covering myself that I don't have to go back and call on 200 prescriptions a day and say, just wanted to make sure, Maria, you're sure you want it the way you wrote it.
This is Joe's compounding pharmacy. We compound,
But
okay?
can I comment here? It clearly says here that you have to document it, that the doctor is aware. So if an inspector comes by and they say, where's your documentation? Even though it's positive, it's a compound, there's no such thing like that. There's no manual. This thing to me says you have to orally or written in writing document that they are aware that this is a compound. Can you see that? And I'm telling you, I deal with these inspectors, and they literally will read like that. And next thing you know, you're in trouble. So why not make this clear? And the CPHA wrote down, and listen to this. If it is clear from the prescription whether a compounded prescription was intended approval shall be obtained orally or in writing. So the point here is if it's unclear. So for instance, if you have a manufactured drug, well, that obviously you better call on but maybe there's a reason. Maybe they have an allergy. But if it's clear, if I have a drug that is not made by a manufacturer, why do I got to call the doctor? But see, she's saying I don't have to, which I agree, but I'm not sure. If a board inspector comes in and says, see here, just read it, word for word.
Joe, have we ever cited you for that in all the years we've been in your facility?
No, but...
Mr. Green, have we ever cited you for that in all the years you've been in your facility?
I've never seen this either.
Yeah.
It's been in the law since 2007.
And the documentation is what would be the documentation on a prescription? What would be the documentation that you've never asked for on a prescription that a doctor wrote out all the ingredients or said, I want Dr. Acosta's nipple ointment? And I know what it is because I've been dealing with Dr. Acosta, no offense, ever since, I've been dealing with this doctor. If I have to document it, what do I do? Just write on the back and say, what?
Is there any question in your mind that's a compounded product when the doctor writes you the formula?
No, but is there a question in Josh's mind when he comes in, or Chris's mind? Not you, but one of your inspectors.
Then that's why you have my number.
Okay.
Well, so actually, it seems like, once again, I don't want to be a stick in the mud, but it seems like maybe if there's some ambiguity, if it's not clear, that maybe we should fix it. So I understand it might be in the law today. If it's not clear and we have these two compounding pharmacists up here like wringing their hands like, are you guys going to come after me and do this? Maybe we should fix it.
So
I think that's going to be in the FAQ.
I do see your point, though, that if there's an opportunity to change the wording or the language, but I don't think that we're here at the board meeting full board meeting to go into the minutia.
I would agree. Can
And
we
I would
give it back
suggest,
to you guys
I would
to fix
suggest
it?
rather than it being delayed, that would implement many months of delay, I would suggest that we deal with this during the hearing process, when there's going to be other wording changes in other sections at the same time, for clarity.
Well, I've been on the board a long time, and
Yeah.
that really worries me when you say
Yeah.
that, because it doesn't always happen.
And then, Christine may not be here 2 years from now
Yeah,
or 3
that's
years, so
fine.
who am I going to
That's
call?
fine. That's fine. I mean, I understand what you're saying. I mean, I understand,
I
I've been on
wouldn't-
the board too long. I
Yeah.
know things go slow, but I also been on the board long enough where we say, we'll fix it in the
Uh,
hearing, and we don't.
Yeah.
Maria?
I mean,
Maria?
I'm torn.
Mr. President.
I've been in the board for 7 years now. I always say, don't fix anything that's not broken. But if this is broken system, then we should fix it. Like he said, Maria may be not here next year or next week. So what they gonna do? So I mean, if something broken, we should fix it. When it's not broken, we should leave it alone.
But they gave you the language. It's simple. Just put that language in. It takes like one line. It could take us maybe 15 seconds.
So-
Want to do it? Let's just do it right now.
So,
Let's do it, okay?
Miss Sherpa,
Were
Go,
you
take-
ever on like a
You want?
game
I'll
show?
write it in for you.
So Maria,
Okay,
if I may,
That's for the giggles and kicks. Let's see,
Maria?
what did CPHA
Go look at the
say?
CPHA.
Okay, one person at a time.
so part of the concern with the CHA comment is I don't see that it has any enforceability in it. The current law, the way that we use it is for compounders that are specifically trying to use a prescription to compound things where they can knock off a commercially available
Right.
product. And so my concern is where you take the good compounders sitting in front of us and we manipulate it to try to make it clearer for them. It takes our enforcement ability out of some of the things that we may need it for. So do what you think we need to do, but the CHA comment is medically unclear, I really can't use.
Just to be clear, what we're talking about in a roundabout way is we're talking about progesterone 100 milligrams, okay? Let's just call it what it is. And you're worried that pharmacies are going to cross it out and write patients allergic to lactose.
No.
What I'm talking about is a prescription that there's no way you're going to get that at CVS. I don't want to call the doctor on it.
So for
And you're-
point of clarification, it's been pointed out that while you are responding to board members' comments, that we're exceeding the time allocated for this discussion. So we either need to come up with a suggestion rather quickly, or I don't know what, but we need to wrap this part up.
So what do you think about CPHA's, and I know, Christine, you're saying that it's by adding, if it's unclear from the prescription whether the compounded preparation was intended, approval shall be obtained orally or in writing.
To me, that seems FAQ kind of material because it's wordy. It's not really written in a legal regulatory fashion. It is more of an explanation, and explanations typically are not in regulations.
Well,
So
then,
I wouldn't be opposed to changing the regulatory language, but not in that way.
When you go to court, they don't look at FAQs. They look at the law, and they say the law is the law. And
So-
that's why it's got to be clear. And the biggest problem with pharmacy is our laws aren't clear.
So
Mr.
what-
President, what
Yeah.
would be your suggestion for moving forward?
Can I just make a suggestion? So what if we said approval is required, let's see, if,
There's a manufacturer.
okay, thank you. Well, okay, thank you. Let me go back to it.
I'm open to, having.
I think,
give us some language.
I appreciate
Oral approval
the
is
board's
required.
patience on this, because I think that anything we can do to save time in the future
Yeah.
is valuable, but as long as we don't spend a lot of time
Right.
at this moment.
Something like, and I probably want you guys to weigh in, but something like approval is required, or oral approval is required on prescriptions where it's unclear.
Mr. President, if I may, since this is coming from CPHA, may I provide an alternate version of this?
Sure, go ahead.
What if we say, if the product is commercially available, then approval shall be obtained orally or in writing, and that eliminates.
That's a different section. Commercially available is not in this section D. This is talking about all products that are compounded, that everyone's aware that they're compounded. So the commercially available is not pertinent to this section.
All right, let me look to our lawyer.
May I suggest something? I'm sorry. So, yeah, I'd like to talk a little bit of process, if that's okay. So as part of the motion, you have delegated changes to the language that are consistent with the board's policy to be made by the executive officer. It would be the interim, right? So what my question is, I look to the chair to see if she believes that she has a clear understanding of what the board policy is. And if you believe that you understand that, then as part of that, you and I can refine the language consistent with the delegated authority so that we're not wordsmithing here, if you believe that's okay.
So let me ask the board that question in a little bit different way. Is, since we do see that the proposed regulation may be misinterpreted, that some word changes to clearly indicate the intent can be made, and that can be delegated to the executive officer because that meets our policy.
Executive officer and you.
And you.
Yeah.
Is that something that the board is comfortable with?
I am.
I'm good with that.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Ann.
And
You saved us an hour.
Yeah, I'm with, yeah.
Do we need a motion or not?
that's part of the existing motion, and that
Already
is
part of it. Okay.
consistent with what the
And thank you
board's done in the
for
past.
your valuable testimony, Mr. Green.
Thank you.
And if it gives you comfort, if the motion does pass, what you're talking about here is the very beginning of the rulemaking process, so you don't lose the ability to make changes down the
Okay.
road.
So I think all the time has been allowed for both of you.
That was Jerry's.
We had a total of 6 minutes by both of you.
I was just sitting next to Jerry. I just have one real
Unfortunately-
quick one, and it's more important than the last one. Honestly, it's more important.
How quick is it?
Okay, very simple. If you take a
You may
look
be
at-
cut off if we think that you're
Yeah.
abusing the
Take a look at
privilege.
1735.1B. We have the word clinically in there.
That's been already spoken to.
That's not a little thing.
That's already been spoken to,
It's
so I would
already
say
been-
you're abusing the privilege.
How do you enforce it? I mean,
Thank you for your time.
That's it. We've already been there. Thank you. It's purposeful.
Hello, my name is Ron Miller. I'm a longtime pharmacist, compounding pharmacist in Cerritos here. And we have serviced the compounding community for many years. And I found that there is a problem in the regulations, that there is a glaring omission. The current 1735.2 includes office use prescribing, office use supplying to physicians who use medication in their office. And I believe that leaving out this regulation will hurt patient care for veterinarians, for dermatologists, for dentists, and that patients will be hurt by not including this. And I know that ASHP, IACP, PCCA are fighting this because Congress did not give the ability to the FDA to discontinue office use medication, but they're doing it anyway. And so I believe that we need to have this. It's a long-standing situation that we have helped our local physicians with their in-office use. So, you know, you might say that 503B, sterile compounding outsourcing facilities are going to do this type of work, but I can't see them making 8 cc's of cantharidin for a dermatologist. So I believe that you should reconsider to put this particular item back in the regulations. We've been doing it really great, especially the last 2.5 years since January 1 of 17 with the paperwork, and I've been inspected, and it's just been a really great thing that we've been able to help a lot of patients and physicians.
Thank you. I appreciate
Thank
your
you.
comments because I know that this is a huge issue. And I was waiting for it to come up, so I appreciate you coming up to bring that up to us. And from what I understand, our state of California is one of the last to allow this to continue. And we've continued it as long as possible. And now it's maybe beyond our control. So in order to explain that a little bit better, I think maybe Chief Inspector Acosta, I can always give her the hard stuff. She is more of an expert, and I have been educated on the information, but again, it's better to go to the source.
Yeah, so I agree with Mr. Putt that the 503A Act does not have any office use exemption whatsoever, and we've been kind of an outlier for way too long. So our pharmacies have a double-edged sword when we come in. We will allow office use under certain restrictions, and then the FDA will come in behind us, and then they will get seen and cited as a manufacturer and be held to CGMP standards. So we are trying to bring ourselves into alignment with what federal law happens. Additionally, the office use exemptions that we significantly reduced in 2017 are still being misused. We're still seeing doctors' offices dispensing for human patients. So there's a lot of reasons why it's time for it to evolve into federal law.
Well, I certainly believe that it's not helping patient care.
Yeah.
It's hurting it. Should be aware of that.
I appreciate your comments and do hear your concern, and we share them in many ways.
And
unfortunately,
I've
as a
also
board,
heard, excuse me, I also heard that that some of the there can be an exemption for veterinary medicine and veterinarians, which we've not included in the federal regulations. So at least maybe make some exception for that. Our little furry friends need help right away. Mostly those kinds of medications are for diarrhea, and they're given right away. Just different types of giardia and diarrhea.
So thank you. I appreciate your comments. I think that especially regarding veterinary practices, I understand that there is some hope and some emerging regulations from the federal level on that. But I'm not quite sure if there's going to be anything emerging on the human front, unless Dr. Acosta has any more information.
The only thing I would say is to support what Mr. Miller says is that 503A specifically talks about human drug products. 503A doesn't give us anything, and the FDA won't look at anything for vet compounders. So it is a possibility we may want to ask for the veterinary board input. They were commenters in our last set of regulations, see if they want to partner with us on something like that. As
Some potential legislation, or what are you talking
just
about?
some insight into what they're seeing in their practices and what the outcome may be in a veterinary practice. I can tell you that they're the reason why the 120-hour supply was in our current law. I haven't seen them interact with us yet. They may not be aware that we're going through this process again, but that may be something we might want to do.
Is your proposal then to ask them to engage us in dialogue at a committee meeting? Or how would that,
I'm not
how
sure
would you
I
propose?
get to propose anything,
Okay.
but it would be possibly something for you guys to consider to
Something to
engage in
consider.
a sister
Okay.
agency.
Is the veterinary impacts of these changes?
Yeah.
I think I heard another board member wanting to comment.
Did you? No. I didn't.
Well,
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I hope for your consideration.
Thank you.
I'd just like to piggyback on this current conversation. My name is Michael Blair. I'm the Vice President of Government and Regulatory Affairs for Wedgwood Pharmacy. I'm also a member of the Arizona State Board of Pharmacy and the Vice President of the International Academy of Compounding Pharmacists. However, I'm before you today as an individual and as a representative of Wedgwood Pharmacy. As background, Wedgwood Pharmacy has been specializing in compounding for veterinarians for well over 20 years. We have 2 locations, one in New Jersey, one in Arizona. Both locations are PCAB accredited. Both locations are licensed with the California State Board of Pharmacy. I have a whole list here of everything that you already spoke about, Section 503A not being applicable to veterinary medicine. Currently, there are no regulations in the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act that address veterinary compounding. Likewise, there are no guidance documents that address veterinary compounding. There's rumor of a veterinary guidance document by the end of this year, but really, there's been no evidence other than just hearsay. Earlier this year, Wedgwood Pharmacy conducted a survey of over 1,100 veterinarians nationally, and approximately 90% of the veterinarians surveyed claimed that access to compounded office use medications for administration was either very or extremely important to their ability to effectively treat their patients. An equal number felt the same way about their ability to dispense from compounded office stock. So if you wanted to know what veterinarians are thinking about office use, that's it. I mean, it is critical. The board has, over the last few years, heard from veterinarians about the differences in the veterinary practice model from the human model. Veterinary clinic can be, it is just that, it is a clinic. The veterinarian at 9 in the morning can be a surgeon. At 11 a.m. he can be a dentist. At 2:30 he can be an ophthalmologist, or she. And they need to have access to medications right away. Sometimes they're in rural locations, sometimes they're out in a farm, they're at a zoo, they're at a wildlife refuge. You can't pigeonhole veterinary medicine into these same strictures as human compounding, and that's what the FDA and the Congress realized when they drafted 503A. So since your current regulations do have language in 1735.2, I believe it's sub C 1, 2, 3, and 4, you do have language that allows for veterinary compounding for veterinary office use and dispensing. Couldn't that just be moved to the new section 1735, the introductory section? And that way you protect the ability of California's four-legged citizens to receive necessary
Sorry, your
medication
time is up. Thank you.
when they need it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi.
I'm glad I did not get in my car. My name is Subhash. I'm the managing member of 503B. I was at the FDA meeting in June in Washington, and rest assured, the first thing I would like to say is there are about 7 503Bs that are doing dermatology non-sterile products. This was a congregation. We were addressing multiple issues. There are about 9 503Bs that are also doing veterinary, sterile, as well as non-sterile products for office use. That is the mandate, and that is what 503Bs are doing. So it does make sense that 503As should do what 503As are supposed to do, which is prescription specific. And even there, we have seen issues like what happened with Guardian Pharmacy in Texas, where a 503A ended up blinding about 60 people. Let's go back a few years, 2011, 2012. We lost a lot of polo ponies. I'm quite sure you will recall in Florida, 503As ended up destroying about 25 to 30 polo ponies. So 503Bs are totally different. Their controls are totally different. Their batch processes are totally different. They're very strict. So what has been proposed, that office supply should be done by 503Bs, or office stock should be done by 503Bs, and 503As should do prescription specific. It's a totally different ballgame. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Maria, just as a point of clarification, 503B also does not specifically address veterinary. It's my
Right.
understanding that B, they can only get a federal B registration if they do human products. So most of the veterinary 503Bs will actually have at least 1 or 2 human products to meet the requirements of the 503B registration.
Dr. Costa is absolutely correct.
So if I understand this, since A, neither of them address veterinary, that we should still be able to use the in-office for the veterinary? Is that correct?
I think I'd rather speak with the vet board and see what they're seeing in the practice. I do see that there will be a gap there, and based on experience, both as a consumer of vet products, I'm not sure I want our compounding to go into the vet practices. I do believe that a pharmacy with proper restrictions may actually be better for our fuzzy patients than allowing the vets or the vet techs or the front office staff to do this compounding. But I would say that what we currently have in law has not been enough to stop some of the bad practices. And that's why I asked that we go work with the vet board and hopefully find a path in which we can hold the vets responsible for providing compounded products for very large volume dispensing. We're seeing them using pharmacies basically as mini manufacturers, and that I don't think is safe.
Okay, thank you.
Any other public comment? Dr. Gray, were you at the back of the line?
Yes. Steve Gray is an individual pharmacist. A couple of quick comments. First of all, just a quick comment, doesn't require, I want you to think about something. One of the things I believe is my responsibility is sometimes to point out some unintended consequences of what we do. And regarding the flavoring, if you think that through, first of all, it applies to all pharmacies. So that would include hospital pharmacies, okay? And if the pharmacist isn't going to be the ones that add the flavoring, who's going to add them? They're going to get added. So in the hospital, they're going to get added by nursing. In the home, they're going to get added by the parents or the caregivers. So the effect of prohibiting flavorings being added by pharmacies is you're just going to push it onto people that are less trained, less have the ability to identify incompatibilities and toxicities with the mixed product, et cetera. So just keep that in mind when you get to the further discussion about prohibiting flavorings. Another thing I'd like to point out is and I have trouble following these documents, so forgive me if I'm wrong, but I think you're recommending in 1735.6 the addition of under B3. It basically says any component used to compound stored, dispensed in accordance with the following, and 3 says Food and Drug Administration issued guidance documents and alerts. Okay? Guidance documents from the FDA are not law. They start out by saying these are not law. And they frequently get changed because by definition they're put out, or by practice, as a guidance, and then they get all kinds of comments and then they change them. So do you really want to put into regulation something that is not law? It may be a standard of practice. It may be a good idea from a civil liability point of view, but do you really want to try to put through OAL something that is not law when you're referring to the federal government? Also, this is where I differ with some of my colleagues. In 1735.7A2, we talk about container closure systems, and you've taken out shall include at least volume. As a person who had to report and resolve errors, sometimes the volume of the container was very important to specify in the master formula. That's how you prevented errors. And so the master formula really did a lot when we adopted that in California to improve safety, because a pharmacist had to sign off before anything started, like it says here, with the master formula. And I think the master formula should specify the volume, not of the container, as well as the closures on the container, my opinion. Another document.
Can I just clarify that? So you're saying in 2, in the container, it should specify volume, or there should be number 5 that should specify volume, item number 5?
Well, number 2 right now is a combo. It says container, hyphen,
right.
Closure systems shall include at least the volume and type of container. So maybe it should be separated. I'm just saying, what I'm looking at, it was taken out, but it wasn't added.
The current motion has taken out the concept, the volume.
Right, and I'm saying I don't necessarily agree that's a good idea.
Okay.
Just a quick comment.
Yeah,
With respect to the recent discussion about compounding for prescriber office use. Okay, is your intent to prohibit that by these regulations for administration as well as dispensing?
So actually, that's a good time to ask the question because the time is up. So I wanted to ask to respond, and maybe you could comment if it doesn't make any sense on the points that you brought up. The points on the FDA guidance documents was actually a long discussion, and it was purposely made more specific. That's why we added about the guidance documents, but your point is well taken about how those documents and other, like even USP and NF sections do change periodically. Going to the container closure system, originally the board committee had very strong opinions about volume, and we were convinced at the committee meeting by the members of the public that that was not as important, and so we agreed with the public to remove that. So I know you prefaced your comments by saying you understand that's not something that your colleagues will agree with you, but that was
Sure.
what the board was going on that. And then their third comment was about office practice.
Right.
Can you repeat your question?
Well, is it your intent with these regulations to prohibit all types, forget veterinary, that's been discussed, of compounding by a pharmacy, a 503A pharmacy for office use, for administration particularly?
Do you want to, Christine, do you understand his specific question?
So I believe your question is will we prohibit office use? And the answer would be yes. 503A only allows pursuant to a prescription.
Okay. Then I would suggest you might want to reconsider that, since the statute, which the regulations are subject to, specifically says in 4052A1 that pharmacies are allowed to compound a reasonable supply for prescriber office use. And I don't think your regulation can overrule the right of a pharmacy that's specified in statute. It would also be a major change in board policy, because the board has steadfastly, since the DSQA, Drug Quality and Security Act, was adopted, to object to the interpretation that that act prevented that. So if that's what you're trying to do by regulation, I think it's a change in board policy, and it's also in conflict with the statute.
I understand that it's a change in board policy, but that's something that we have essentially been dragged into and have avoided, like many other states have not done office use compounding for quite a long time. California is one of the last, essentially dragged kicking and screaming down that.
I just want to make the
your comment regarding other regulatory areas that may state that, I think we need to just research that. So can you give that citation again, and we'll make sure that we're not in conflict.
4052A1, I think it is.
I have it.
Right.
Got it.
Okay. And then lastly, on 1735.13, packaging and transporting.
Okay.
You want to hear another problem or not?
You have. Well, your time is up.
Do you wanna hear it or
Can
not?
you sum it up in 10 to 15 seconds?
Yes. Basically, what I heard you say earlier was that that intends to place the burden on a problem with transporting with the transporting company.
No, that's not
That's
what I
not
said.
what it
If that was what was understood, I'm sorry to say that. But what
Okay.
we were saying was that it was incumbent on the pharmacy to have contracts, practices, and standards with how medications are delivered and what processes they use. If there is a problem that occurs that is solely the responsibility of the company, example is you send something via Federal Express and it's supposed to be refrigerated, and you agree it's refrigerated, but something happens and the plane doesn't take off and it's at 100 degrees for too long,
Right.
the pharmacy's not going to get cited for that.
Okay.
They would have to report that as part of their contract, that company should be reporting back to their shipping that they were unable to maintain it refrigerated. That should all be part of the responsibility of the pharmacy to have processes, but the individual things that can go wrong is not the pharmacy going to be. Am I stating that correctly, Dr. Acosta?
So it's a matter of what their contract provisions are.
And the expectations.
Of
So
each
if you
one.
choose a supplier who's not able to perform to those standards, then that becomes a pharmacy issue.
And the Uniform Commercial Code specifies that. It's up to the shipper to be responsible unless it's contracted otherwise.
Exactly. Thank you.
So I guess, and to his point, 4052 are the permitted functions for pharmacists, and A1 does say furnish a reasonable quantity of compounded drug product to a prescriber for office use by the prescriber. So is that, I mean, I don't know, how do we deal with that if that's one of our?
Notice that.
So I think we're gonna have to look into it. I think that the federal law is the later enacted statute, and I don't know that we made conforming changes. I'd have to look at the preemption language. I think that the preemption language was specific to just the track and trace, but I'd have to look at that as well to see where or if we need to be making our law conform with the federal law.
So, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Gray, for bringing that up. Any other public comment?
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Lale Ford. I'm a compound
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Can you get closer to the
Okay.
microphone?
My name is Lale Ford. I'm a pharmacist. I'm also board member of California Pharmacists Association. So I have a couple of questions because on my practice, we adopted everything based on policy procedure and also the USP guideline. And now it seems that we have to readjust a couple of stuff. So for instance, the 1735 4C. So are we able to use dishwasher? And also,
yes.
The other one, 1735 5A, the cleaning agent, because that was more regulated for Chapter 797.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So the 1735 5A,
I'm
that
sorry,
was also.
I didn't hear. Did you have a comment about 4C?
Yes, I just want to make sure if this is gonna, am I still able to use the dishwasher for the cleaning, or
Yes.
should be this? Okay, perfect. And also on 1735 5A, the sanitizing agent, that was more for the 797 that we needed to document it, but for the 795, are we still need to document that?
Correct.
Okay, so there was no, because that wasn't any guideline US
Right.
before. And, I mean, it's a part of the policy procedure overall.
Correct.
So, and I was wondering because it seems that USP, it's not directly address all the guideline, or that's why the Board of Pharmacy added more to.
So that, like we stated in the beginning of the presentation, is that it is up to the board to, I lost the word now, to clarify USP and to apply standards above USP that we need to provide for patient safety within our state. So we have a mandate to assure that not only does USP cover everything that we think it should, but we could add to that.
I see. And also regarding dispensing to the doctor offices for the usage of patient, it's like it's really gray area still, because if the I mean, I recommend it to the, so they can write a prescription for the patient and patient pick it up, but sometimes the doctor said, no, we don't know how much they're going to use, especially for the dermatology offices for numbing agent, for instance. So they don't want the patient to handle that, so they want to be able to apply to the area. So I was wondering, what is the latest regulation in that regard?
So that's what we just finished speaking with the previous public testimony, and that federal law and federal regulations are going to be changing the practice, and so the opportunities are that there are companies under the 503B designation that would be able to provide that service. So it is going to be a significant change to physician offices.
I see. Okay.
And did any clarification from Chief Inspector Acosta or from any of the staff? Okay.
The only thing I
Thank
would
you for your
say
questions.
is that your comment on the sanitizing agent, that is something that is required under 95, and I think maybe you're confusing sanitizing agent with the cleaning and disinfecting agent that is in 797. So the sanitizing agent is actually required. for
Yeah, it's
non-sterile.
required, but like I was wondering, it was basically didn't clarify it was enough for the USP 795, or we need to just
Great. Okay. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate the
You're
questions.
welcome.
Any other comment? Okay, so I have one last thing to say. So I wanted to thank everyone for, on the board and in the public for their comments to our process in the compounding committee. We've found the process very rewarding in working with all members and stakeholders. Mr. President,
Yes.
we are ready for a vote on the motion.
Okay. Had all of our comments, so all those in favor of supporting the motion, raise your hand.
Can I ask for clarification?
Certainly. Oh, sorry. That was for Greg to say, not for me.
Isn't that harassment? Didn't we get that in our?
It's justified.
All right.
It's justified.
It doesn't matter if it's justified or not. If I feel like I'm being harassed, I'm being harassed.
Does somebody have a hook?
So my clarification is, we're clarifying, so you're going to work on the language around
Right.
the authorization. And then we're also going to, as far as flavoring, we're going to send a letter. And then I guess as far as the vet, we're going to talk to the vet board. So that's
Right.
all incorporated. That's what I'm voting
incorporated.
for.
So I think some of that is staff direction,
Yeah.
because
It-
this
it-
is
yeah.
this is
It's
movement
not
of the
part
right,
of-
the other's direction.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that I'm out there.
It'll happen. Okay. All those in favor of the motion? All those who need additional clarification? Okay, unanimous.
I don't think Mr. Sanchez,
not
I didn't see
unanimous?
him raise his hand.
You didn't
second
see a
time.
hand down here?
It was a committee recommendation.
He voted yes.
Oh, by the time I looked up, I was writing note, and I looked up and your hand was down when everybody
Don't
else.
question
Sorry.
things if you're not looking up.
So in conclusion, for the committee report, I want to thank everybody for their time and the board for their patience with us. Our next committee meeting is scheduled for August 28th in Irvine.
And I actually want to thank you, because you've gone through this very methodically, and for someone who really doesn't understand all the 795, I actually kind of think like, not like Christine, but I kind of understand what's going on.
Okay. Thank you all. We're going to recess and come back tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.